Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. How are we doing? It is time. It's time for a new trial. I've been keeping this one a little bit close to the vest. Defense made a motion for a mistrial. Prosecutor was up to some fuckery. Potentially damaging evidence, no basis for it. The judge specifically said, do not ask that question. Do not use that as evidence. She walked right down the path and asked the question. It may be over on Tuesday morning. Batman Bruce Wayne bitch snitch. Gerald Brooks, your constitution does not apply to me because I'm a sovereign citizen, a traveler on the land. I'm the Moorish Empire or whatever, bitch snitch. Because they're so fucking absurd. If you want to be a sovereign citizen, just do yourself a favor first. Go to YouTube here and just get every sovereign citizen that's ever been before. Find me one that won. God dang, you're right. Don't go down this. It's not the path. Don't have time for stupidity. Some clever dick on the internet didn't find the great loophole in all of the world's law. Bitch snitch. God dang, you're right. God dang, you're right. Traveler on the land. God dang, you're right. Moorish Empire. Traveler on the land. Bitch snitch. Moorish Empire. God dang, you're right. Traveler on the land. Bitch snitch. Late evening U.S. people. Hey, everybody, y'all know what time it is. It's this time.
And tonight on the ABC News, OJ Simpson kills one more person. Oh my god, I can't believe it. OJ kills another person? I didn't know Minute Maid orange juice could kill people. I guess well, what happened here was that someone poisoned the OJ and, well, killed somebody. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time on ABC, the horrible news in the whole world. Thank you. Well, I hope you liked how I did my commercials. You know, I'm gonna be a star. I've always been a star, you know. I just have to go to Hollywood, and then I'll just, you know, everybody would be like going, oh, I want your autograph, oh, I want your autograph. But anyways, see you later. Adios. Ciao.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, whoever you're doing it with, wherever you're doing it, however good it feels, and all that other stuff. Welcome to Thursday on Legal Vices. That's me, Legal Vices. And we're doing our Thursday OJ for probably the third to last time. There's 3 weeks, maybe 2 left. So 2 or 3 weeks, then we'll be done. We'll be moving on. First of all, Chandler is not here today. Chandler is migrainey. She's not feeling well, but also she won't be here on Thursdays in the future. I'm saddened because she is taking on another project. She's getting ready to take the LSAT. I'm sure she'll catch you up to all the details on her channel. She's going to be otherwise engaged and very, very busy studying very, very diligently for the next few months. So I'll be flying solo here
be flying solo here on Thursdays while she does the studying and the preparing and the testing and all that other cool stuff. And then once OJ is done, we have to move on to a new trial. The one trial I desperately wanted to stream on my channel, I can no longer do for reasons that will become apparent at some point in the future, I think. So I have to choose a new trial, but I'm gonna let you guys here. There's 60 of you. Welcome to the slowest day of the week, OJ Thursday is the slowest day of the week. We're gonna let you choose which trial we stream next. Let me tell you a little bit about each of these trials here. It's on the like and subscribe poll, so everybody here hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you're subscribed already, make sure you're still subscribed and take our like and subscribe poll. There's a few videos here. There's a few possible trials that I was looking at. One of them is the parent dismemberment trial. That's not the Chandler Halderson trial. This is Tennessee versus Guy. Tennessee versus Guy from 2020. Joel Michael Guy Jr. is accused of murdering his parents Thanksgiving weekend in 2016. The prosecution claims Guy Jr., a 28-year-old college dropout at the time, was irate when his parents said they were going to cut him off financially. Nice choice of words there. He allegedly stabbed them to death before dismembering their bodies. Their remains were found spread throughout the Knox County home during a welfare check. Also, the triple family witchcraft murder. That's the second choice, the triple family witchcraft murder. 63-year-old Donald Wayne Hartung is accused of murdering his mother and two younger half-brothers in Pensacola, Florida. Home of the three victims, in the home that the three victims shared. On July 28th, 2015, the bodies of 77-year-old Vonsil Smith, 47-year-old John Smith, and 49-year-old Richard Smith were found 3 days after the crime, buried under piles of clothes in what is believed to be a ritualistic killing. That's the triple family witchcraft murder and the attempted Korean twin sister murder. This was a big one, especially here in Korea. They ain't got some stash hair in my mouth there. Okay. This is California versus Han. 23-year-old Gina Han, is accused of plotting to kill her identical twin sister, Sunny, with whom she was feuding. Twin sisters get in an argument, so one of them, Jean, she enlisted the help of two teen co-defendants, R.G. Bryant and John Sarayath, to break into Sunny's Irvine apartment and kill her. When the teens entered the apartment, Sunny was able to call 911 before she was bound and gagged in a bathtub. That's the attempted Korean twin sister murder. And finally, the faith-healing urinary tract murder. The faith-healing urinary tract murder. This is Oregon v. Beagley from 2010. Jeffrey and Marcy Beagley are charged with criminally negligent homicide in the death of their son, 16-year-old Neil Jeffrey Beagley. Neil died on June 17, 2008 from complications of a urinary tract blockage, according to medical examiners. The condition, which doctors say is easily treatable, caused kidney and heart failure. The Beagleys belong to a religious sect known as the Followers of Christ Church, which rejects medical treatment and instead relies on prayer. Neil refused medical care, but prosecutors allege he was too young to refuse medical treatment, and his parents had a responsibility to provide him with medical care. Those are the four choices you've got here. So choose wisely, because that's the next trial we're going to cover. Whichever one wins here at the end of the day, the dismembering the parents, the triple family witchcraft murder, the attempted Korean twin sister murder, and the faith-healing urinary tract murder trials. Probably not a urinary tract murder. It's probably a should just be like a death thing. Anyway, negligent homicide, but murder sounds better. All right, so that's it. That's what we've got going there. And without further ado, let's bring up our super special guest, Hayden. What's up, Hayden?
G'day, peeps. I tell you what, that my money's on the Korean twins, because that just sounds really interesting. But the faith healing urinary tract, we actually had a fairly similar case like that recently, where a family decided that they weren't going to provide their little girl treatment, and she passed away as a result. So those ones are never great.
No,
but I'm
at least this one was 16. So
yeah.
At least he said, "I'm refusing medical treatment," and the prosecutor said, "Well, no, you can't do that. You're too young." So we're gonna try your parents.
Okay.
How you doing?
I cannot complain. You'll have to excuse me. I'm off camera at the moment because the hair's not great, not gonna lie. And at some point I have to be up in about 4 hours.
That's why you have these.
Yeah, except it's summer and it is ridiculously hot in my office. I have no idea why. I've got 4 friggin' monitors on and there's no ventilation in this room.
4 monitors. That's monitor overkill.
Well, it gets the job done.
Yeah.
Not
Oh,
naked,
well.
but pants are prison.
Yes, he's a member. He's also involved in witchcraft and a member of a religious cult. He's afraid that the camera will steal his soul. Yeah, there we go.
Gonna leave that joke alone.
All right. Yes, he hasn't taken. Let's see. What are we looking at here? I guess that's it. My finger went to the Korean one like I was possessed, says Bifront. Thank you so much. And Sarah Winks, so messed up. There's lots of things that are messed up. We're going to be talking about all the messed up things here. Are they tonsil twins? No, these are actual legitimate twins. Can I choose all of them? Well, maybe we'll take them in the order of the votes. You'll just have to wait and see. They're all relatively short. Take a few months each. Urinary tract blockage, WTF? Yeah. Ugh. Heart failure from a urinary tract blockage. That sounds bad. Just bad. Which one has the best audio? They all have great audio. That was one of the requirements. Did he have them for Thanksgiving? Oh yeah. Well, we don't know. Again, I think if you go to all the trouble of chopping up somebody, or in this case, several people, two people, chopping up people and scattering their remains around the house, I find it hard to believe he didn't at least lick the blade clean. That's just me, though. I think you can go all the trouble. Halderson, I'm sure he took a nibble. It's just business. Like I said, if Shabusiness sampled the goods, that was the least crazy thing she did that night. So, I'm thinking if you're gonna kill somebody and chop them up and go to all that work, you're probably just gonna have a go. Like, I'm curious.
Exactly. If you're gonna go that far, you're gonna take a taste.
I'm thinking so. Well, hell. Hi, everybody. Welcome to everybody that's here. We've got, we're going to do this for our 2 hours here, and we got about 2 hours. What we're going to do, we're going to start out with Barry Sheck. He's going to wrap up before too long, and then Johnny Cochran is going to step back in for the ending of the defense's closing arguments, and then next week we'll do the prosecution rebuttal. So we'll get a little bit of Barry and a little bit of Johnny. So that's what we're going to do.
Johnny.
Are you ready, Hayden?
I am
ready to fill
ready
Chandler's shoes. You're nowhere near as cute as Chandler is, but you'll do. You'll do in a pinch.
And see, and here I was going to go about how, she'd flown the coop and spread her wings, so you had to pull in the big guns. And then you got to go and do me dirty like that. Thank you.
Well, I mean, there is that. You're just I was going to say her guns are cuter, but that's even weirder. Never mind. Yeah. Hi, Hayden. Welcome. All right, let's go. But we'll have Chandler on his separate stream as soon as possible. There you go. We'll have Chandler on here as soon as possible. Oh, yeah, and by the way, 2 weeks from Friday, 2 weeks from tomorrow, my time, is the February Bucket Friday. So there you go. 2 weeks from now, stand by, bring all your shekels, dollars, dineros, pesos, Australian money, and other things, other forms of currency, and throw it at my feet, because we're going to have another fucking Friday 2 weeks from today. Next week, there'll be no Friday show because I have to go to Seoul and hang out there. And then 3 weeks after that, I'm going to go to China for a few days on the weekend. So let's do this one. Well, it sounds like it's really, China's literally an hour away from my house. It's just like an hour flight. It takes me longer to drive from my house to the airport than it does to fly from the airport to China. So there we go. Where's the ship? I am.
Okay.
I is. We're still right there. Where's the Sheckmeister? Sheckmeister. There you go. All right, people, and as always, we'll pull up the super chats, assuming that any super chats actually come in today. We'll read them as they come up. As always, not required, not expected, not begged for. Some subliminally, maybe. But Doggo Cam, we know that the doggo cam gets unlocked. That achievement gets unlocked at $100. It's been a minute since that happened. Yesterday was the first time in ages. So let's see how this all goes, shall we? Marv White, member for 14 months, kicking us off of the membership freebies here. Thank you so much for your support for 14 months. Weird. The poll does not have Great Moonshine Conspiracy as a choice. Yeah, and it won't, because that was not televised, and they didn't really have television in 1937. But anyway, all right, let's get on with the show here. We're just gonna pick it up mid-stride. Well, if the Taiwan invasion starts, I don't care. I'm gonna be in Beijing. I'm gonna go pop on over and see Abby, who we did she came over here and hung out with me, and we did the whiskey stream. I'm gonna pop on over there and hang out with her for a couple days on a weekend. So, all right.
To the body. Question: if that dog used this shaded place to sleep or lie down on a regular basis when it was in the Bundy residence, might you expect to find some fur hairs left behind in the soil? Answer: I would expect that, yes. Question: and if the Rockingham glove were deposited any time on that soil, the Rockingham glove being on the Bundy soil in the closed-in area, were deposited any time on that soil, might that not explain the presence of those hairs? Answer: it could, yes. So very simply, he's saying that this is hair from the soft underbelly of Cato of the dog. The kind that you would...
he has to make sure people aren't thinking it's the hair from the soft underbelly of Cato Kalin, the house guest. Okay, so let's say you're interested in a girl, Hayden. You're interested in a girl.
Right.
You move in with her. Her crazy ex-NFL player boyfriend says, I'll tell you what, move out of her house and you can live with me for free. And then the girl goes and names her dog after you. Are you flattered? Or how do you feel about that?
I'm disturbed, and I'm a little bit worried that she sees me as a pet.
Marv White, thank you so much for the $2. The first actual real super chat of the evening. Thank you so much, brother. But you do know the year it's working. I'm intimately familiar with it. We're just, it's just not that interesting to talk about on the show. But we'll see. Maybe sometime it'll happen. But anyway, thank you so much for the $2 super chat. We are $98 away from unlocking the achievement. That's back to Barry Sheck.
Expect to be shed if he were lying on the ground there. Not the kind that you get if the dog sort of pats you, all right?
Wait, the dog
comes up.
That's like wagging the dog, huh?
They're going to probably claim fleeing the crime scene or something. It's a soft hair.
Fleeing the crime scene, get it? Flee?
In the closed-in area. What does that mean? That means that Rockingham glove...
puns run rampant in this.
...started at Bundy. Somebody took it somewhere else. You know
that sounds like anal. Somebody took it somewhere else.
Let's go on to the next slide. The socks. There's no fiber on the socks consistent with either glove, and these are cashmere gloves where cashmere would easily come out and get on your hands, transfer to the socks. No fiber consistent with Mr. Goldman's clothes, and we know there was hand-to-hand combat here. No fiber consistent with Nicole Brown
Simpson's
Simpson's
that Saturday
clothes.
night.
Nothing on those socks. Also, we should add no soil on those socks, no trace, no berries, nothing. Pretty interesting, those socks. Next one, please.
And biggin.
As far as the hair is concerned, no hair from Mr. Goldman, no hair from Nicole Brown Simpson on those socks. Next, please. As far as Bronco fiber is concerned, no Bronco fiber is found on either glove. No Bronco fiber, no fiber consistent with Mr. Goldman's clothes is found. No fiber consistent with Nicole Brown Simpson's clothes is found. Next. As far as hair, no hair consistent with Miss Brown Simpson. No hair consistent with Mr. Goldman on the Bronco.
How often do you have to shave a Bronco?
Okay. And I should add, in the Bronco, what they did is not only they take out that carpet, but they went in and they vacuumed it.
It's its winter coat. Yeah.
They vacuumed it to get all the hair and trace. They vacuumed it. And even Mr. Diedrich himself, when he was talking about hair transfer, said, well, the way it would get transferred is when you sit down in your car, things would come off. There's nothing in the Bronco. How can that be? Now I'd like to move on to the crime scene at Bundy and evidence of struggle, the testimony of Dr. Baden and Dr. Lee. And I guess Dr. Lakshmanan, who came in here as the person for the prosecution to try to reconstruct that crime scene. You know, there are bloodstain experts and criminalists and people like Dr. Lee out there. Prosecution could have called to come in here and try to assess this evidence for you. They did not do so. They brought you Dr. Lakshmanan working over section generation photographs, who was a coroner, to do only one part as best he could with this evidence. Now, we know, as Ms. Clark indicated in her closing argument, that Nicole Brown Simpson did struggle before her death. And we know that there were defensive
Yoda, why are you sitting on
wounds
Strawberry's head?
on her hands. And we know that some of the wounds to her neck showed evidence of struggle. And then we have
Their family.
the fingernail scrapings.
You're from Utah. It still
Now.
counts.
Mr. Sims had said that he would expect that when you did fingernail scrapings, you would find, excuse me for just a second,
Vince McMahon impression.
he would expect that there would be skin under the nails. Now, he's a fine man and a fine forensic scientist. I have no quarrel with him, but he was admittedly testifying in
Drunk.
an area outside of his expertise when he told you. He was saying that was his common sense understanding. But Dr. Baden came in and testified about what one ordinarily finds as a coroner with fingernail scrapings. Dr. Lakshmanan didn't dispute it, and that is that with fingernail scrapings, when you find it, you find blood under the nails, but you don't find skin, because when it grabs,
Scary
the
Shrek.
blood comes up, but the skin doesn't come with it. That's what Dr. Baden says you find. That's what the textbooks say you find when you get fingernail scrapings. So you would get blood, but not tissue. So let's explode that myth right away.
Ooh.
But now,
Exploding
we
of blood and
have
tissue
the
sounds
problem
violent.
for the prosecution, that
Just
when
makes
they
me think
do the
something got
fingernail
snapped.
scrapings, they come up on the EAP system
Eep.
with a B. That is not OJ Simpson's type. That is not Nicole Brown Simpson's type. That is not Mr. Goldman's type. It is
Personal
some
thoughts.
other person. And that's what their typing results showed. And so then it doesn't fit. It can't be right. So we have to see if we can make an assessment that would somehow undercut that finding. Now remember, when you have two conflicting reasonable interpretations of evidence, in a circumstantial evidence case, you have to go with the one that, the inference that's consistent with innocence. Now let's look at what happened.
If the prosecutor's a twit, you must acquit.
Mr. Matheson said,
Yeah.
I think
He's a
what
twat,
could
you must
be
acquat.
here is that we had, can we show this slide? A four-banded BA from the Nicole Brown Simpson
Sounds like a sex
that
act.
degrades into
Four-banded
a
BA.
two-handed B. Now, you recall this testimony, I'm sure, and the cross-examination by Mr. Blazer and the testimony by Mr. Sims, who'd been doing serology a lot longer than Mr. Matheson, had a lot of experience in conventional serology. These are the facts. The facts are, in the literature, this supposed
I think he knows he's
degradation
muted or-
pattern that Greg Matheson suggests could occur does not exist. There is no literature. Dr. George Sensabaugh, all the experts in this field, that doesn't happen. Nobody has seen it. Mr. Sims, who did more conventional serology than Mr. Matheson, said he, in his experience, has never seen a four-banded BA degrade into a two-banded B. Never. Mr. Matheson says he thinks he recalls somewhere he saw it. That ain't good enough. That kind of maybe I saw it, that ain't good enough. Maybe doesn't cut it in a criminal case. We're talking proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This is nonsense.
This kind of
Now-
might be Joe Pesci.
The other thing that they're trying to say is, all right, you can put aside the EAPB because there was DNA testing of some of that material under the nails, and that came back as 1.1, 1.1 Nicole Brown Simpson's type. And they think that you're not going to understand this, but you do. Because as you heard, the EAP system is a red blood cell. A red blood cell does not have a nucleus. There's no DNA on the red blood cell. The EAP typing system is something that looks at antigens on the outside of that red blood cell. So you can have blood under that nail, small amounts of blood under that nail, test that to an EAPB, and then when you get the little bed of epithelial cells under the nail, all right, or even some other things, that blood that might have come in there from Nicole Brown Simpson, that can type out 1.1, 1.1. But the initial scrapings, when they ducked down, they came up with the EAPB. And you can't get around that. And you can't try to explain it away. And they don't bring in any serologists. Now, even Mr. Sims, and he's not a doctor, Mr. Sims, the best that he could do in looking at all of this, when they finally asked him the question on page 28748, he said, well, looking at all these findings, I can't
Never mind the
exclude
buzzcocks.
the possibility that the EAPB, or that might have been from the Nicole Brown system. I can't exclude the possibility. That is not exactly a firm statement. That is, again, a maybe.
It was for the Zachariah
and a maybe
Anderson
doesn't cut it
jury,
in a criminal
apparently.
case. And when you have two reasonable conflicting inferences, you've got to go with the one
Yeah, but to be
consistent with
fair, I
innocence.
mean, like,
and that's what
the
this
standard of
evidence
proof
shows.
is sort of degraded over time.
Fact. I'm not
Just
making
like
any of this
DNA.
up. Those are facts.
That was the joke.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, no. Would you like a
Want a glass of water?
She looks like a meerkat just popping her head up with her
something
dew
to
there.
say? Now, can we have the board? There's
Commercial
the
break.
whole issue of Mr. Goldman and his struggle with perpetrator or perpetrators. There were
Hey,
30
sock
stab
snatcher.
wounds inflicted upon Mr. Goldman.
See, people, he had
caught
30
to a bat. Well,
stab wounds.
there were
How could
cuts on
OJ
his
not have
hands.
any blood all
Open
over
palm,
him?
Sure. But what does that mean? If there are cuts on his hand and he is struggling with an assailant,
Defensive wounds.
it gets on the clothes of the assailant.
It does.
40 wounds.
Dr.
At that
Lee
point, I'm expecting, like,
did
stomach fluid.
an analysis of the scene based on the limited evidence that he could get, because they didn't
Plus,
document
Nicole
it in
Brown
any way where you could do a
Simpson's
full
throat was slit
reconstruction, just a
so
limited
deep it
reconstruction.
scratched her spinal
And we
column.
had multiple
Jesus.
contacts, blood transfers in different areas of the closed-in area.
OJ
And
stain
in each of
resistant.
these different areas where the multiple contacts occurred, as you recall, there were also vertical blood drops. And the fair inference from that evidence is that there's a struggle, people are up against one area, then another area, up against the other area, blood drops are going down. So there's struggle in different areas with an assailant or assailants. I mean, we can just reason from facts. We can't. Dr. Lakshmanan got up, and there's a whole hypothesis here that it all happened so quickly by surprise, stealth, surprise. I mean, you can't do that. You've got to look at facts. You've got to do a best analysis, a fair inference from the facts. And the facts show that there's multiple contacts in these different areas from the bloodstain evidence by the world's leading analyst of this, whose testimony on these points stand unrefuted. There is, of course, as we've discussed, the dugout area, particular struggle here. As even Detective Lang told you, where there's, and other areas where there's signs of struggle between the assailant and Mr. Goldman, soil on the socks. There's contact by the way that they're banging against the sides of the gate, such that pants are going to come into contact with pants and shirt. Now, it's clear from the way this struggle went that some point early on, Mr. Goldman sustained this wound to his neck, and the blood began oozing down. And as Dr. Lee pointed out, he had to be standing, Dr. Baden, had to be standing vertical for some period of time because the blood did go down from his shirt all the way down his pants leg. And we saw blood, a lot of blood on the back of his pants. Now, if assailants are struggling together, there's going to be blood from the pants, blood from the shirt, in close contact, transferred to the assailant. Gotta be. It's a bloody struggle. And that's what this bloodstain evidence shows you. It's fair inferences from the facts. Now, the beeper and the keys.
Beep.
The significance, I submit to you, of the beeper and the keys at the very least, put aside keys as weapon. Just the significance is thrown, you know, there's violence, tussling and struggling. The beeper is thrown down here. In the other area, another area of struggle, the keys are thrown down. If the keys are in the pocket, that's got to be a considerable tussle because for the keys to come out of the pocket in the other area. Or if the keys are in his hand,
Eye roll.
well, he's going to use that as a
Are we
weapon.
boring you, Marcia?
So you can't, you can't have it both ways. It shows multiple banging and struggling throughout that area.
That's what Chris Darden and Marcia Clark were
Now,
doing,
the
banging
key
and
fact
struggling.
That Ms. Clark conceded in her closing argument. Key fact is what Dr. Baden told you about the time between the wound in the neck and the time to the last fatal wound in the chest. And this is just fact. As Dr. Lee would say, there's scientific fact, there's interpretation. We deal with fact. The fact is that this wound had to come first, the one to the neck. There's blood oozing down.
Hey, paralegal
And the
Liz,
last
what's up?
wound is to the chest. When the wound in the chest occurred, as Dr. Baden told you, there's only 100 cc's of blood in the chest. What that must mean is that by the time Mr. Goldman was stabbed there, his heart was compromised. It wasn't beating very hard. So you did not have
Beating of the heart
amount,
is the
much
only
more than 100
sound.
cc's of blood you would expect to find in the chest if it hadn't been the last, if not about the last wound. And Dr. Baden said, from the time, just based on finding 100 cc's in the bleeding, a compromise of the heart, the time between the first stab and the last stab would be between at least 5 minutes, as much as 15 minutes, most reasonably 10. Now, that doesn't mean that the struggle went on from the first wound to the last wound for 10 minutes. What it means is, and this is what's crucial, that the assailant or assailants were there for that period of time. Could be that Mr. Goldman was subdued, was lying on the ground, and they did come and stab him last and make that last wound. But we know from the
This
facts
does sound like a very bloody affair.
that between this wound and the wound to the chest, most reasonably 10 minutes, somebody's there, at least some people are there for 10 minutes. Now, if the struggle occurs, starts 10:35, 10:40, based on scientific fact, Mr. Simpson can't be guilty of these crimes because he can't be two places at the same time, can he? Now, that time
Best
period
news
is
headline I
even,
ever read.
longer. They say, oh, take the 5 minutes.
What are you going to
Give
do?
us,
Stab me?
the prosecution,
Last words of stabbing victim.
the inferences. Well, you can't, you can't. Because reasonable inferences, if it's between 5 and 15, most reasonably 10, you got to take 10. You can't give them the 5. That's not the way you can reason about a circumstantial evidence case. But even if you take the 5, something
pretty much.
happened
That's
before
what they
that
said.
first wound, some period of time. So the window, the time here that these murders took is not this incredibly quick event
He wasn't a ninja.
that is necessary for the prosecution's timeline. And that's based on a reasonable
Well, that's
careful,
disappointing.
scientific investigation of the evidence by Dr. Baden, one of the foremost pathologists, and Dr. Lee, one of the foremost forensic experts. This is evidence. Now, the next thing I'd like to point out has to do with the bloodstain imprints on the envelope.
We've got about 10
I'm
more
sorry,
minutes
I
of
forgot
Barry,
this.
and then a
Thank
little
you very
more.
much. One other thing I should mention about the struggle. It's a critical point. I can't believe I left it out.
Oh, what could you possibly have left out?
How did,
On this board. Are there remains on this board?
no. Where did this come from? Dr. Lee testified that it is a fresh cut. You can see when you examine the clean part of the top here, the interior. It is a fresh cut from a sharp instrument, consistent with a knife. Think about that.
Okay.
Think about that.
Thinking.
What does that indicate about the nature of this struggle? Mr. Goldman, one or two assailants, somebody coming towards him, he kicked. Dr. Lee
He was a
testified
ninja.
that by the angle that is consistent with the foot being raised in the air and a sharp instrument coming down. There's kicking. And if there's kicking, why are there no bruises on Mr. Simpson's body consistent with that kick?
He kicked the knife, apparently.
And why didn't anybody else come in here and point out this cut on the boot? Very significant evidence. And of course, there's the dirt on the boot that you would expect to see, and the blood on Mr. Goldman's jeans, and the broken buttons, indication of struggle there. Now, the blood stain imprints on the envelope. Now, I know it's not Mr. Bodziak's area, but you have to consider all the evidence. And Dr. Lee, I think, gave us all a pretty sound education on bloodstain interpretation, enough to basically figure out and understand which blood stains, that certain deposits are made first, then other deposits are made over them. And I think that that's, pretty significant in terms of assessing this. Now, the first point that I think this goes to is, you recall Mr. Bodziak's testimony that there could only be one set of footprints leaving the scene. And when you analyze it, he concedes that that was based on the assumption
That's because Jesus was
that there
carrying
was
the
a
killer on
pool
his
of
shoulders.
blood that all assailants would have to walk through.
There was
And
a pool?
I understand that he was not following all of Dr. Lee's testimony, only, I guess, 95% of it that dealt with footprints, but not the full 95%, as I originally thought he was saying. But the point is, it's like you forgot about Dr. Lakshmanan. Dr. Lakshmanan offered a scenario in broad respects that Dr. Baden said could well be the case, and it seems to be an operating premise here. And that is that Ms. Nicole Brown Simpson was subdued. She could have been hit on the head. It wouldn't necessarily knock her out, as Dr. Baden indicated, but might have incapacitated her or knocked her out. And then there's a struggle with Mr. Goldman, and then, or as a close to the final act, Ms. Nicole Brown Simpson's leaning over the stairwell, is inflicted with the last wound to her neck, and then the huge blood pool occurs. But if you're not necessarily that is the assumption underlying Agent Bodziak's testimony, that if there were to be another set of footprints, it would have to be dark from a big pool of blood. It's not consistent with what Lakshmanan said. There could have been 1, 2 other people left that scene, somebody without leaving that tracks. They could have come out the way that the police did, which wouldn't leave imprints. Or there could have been partial imprints with small amounts of blood on the shoes that were not discovered because, frankly, they were not looking, as you can tell, very hard or very aggressively for anything other than focusing in on those Bruno Magli shoes. And I realize Agent Bodziak thinks very well of the photography of the criminalists at the LAPD, but taking good photographs of one's Bruno Magli shoes does not mean that was combined.
They wrap it up, boy.
Does not mean that they were looking for other imprints, as his book recommends that people do, and do aggressively. Now, the one really interesting part of this envelope has to do with its handling. Do you recall Dr. Lee pointed out on the far right-hand corner that this is a mirror image stain, meaning that it had to be a wet deposit and then somebody folded the envelope. So the blood is wet and the envelope is folded.
I got your wet
And
deposit
let me see,
right
can
here.
we have the next? This is what number, I'm sorry? 1348 is he focused in, is what appears to be consistent with a light transfer of a finger. Next. Next one. No.
Technology. Why is Jesse Jackson back
If
there?
you recall, there was the other print consistent with the finger.
Ew.
See the bottom one there? The top one is the light one, and then the bottom one. See how that's, as Dr. Lee pointed out, could be a finger that was completely covered in blood making contact with the envelope. Now, this is a very interesting fact if you think about it, because Ms. Clark gave the hypothesis to you in her closing argument that Mr. Goldman was taken by surprise, dropped the envelope to the ground. So her theory is not that he kept that envelope in his hand as the struggle is continuing, or that he would make the bloody imprints on the envelope with his fingers. But somebody was interested in that envelope. Somebody appears to have opened up that envelope and created a bloody smear on the one lens we have remaining. Somebody made the mirror image fold on that envelope. Somebody was looking in it for some reason who had been in a struggle and left a bloody imprint of fingers. It's interesting, isn't it? And it is consistent with, well, it is inconsistent, certainly, with the prosecution's theory of Mr. Simpson committing these crimes, and consistent with others. Now, let's discuss the imprints.
Let's not. Let's wrap it up. Come on, we want Johnny back.
Late, and there's a lot to cover here, but let me just briefly go through that imprint evidence on the piece of paper, on the envelope, and on the jeans. Let's and what Dr. Lee found on the walkway, and let's just piece it through, simple step by step. You'll go back, you'll look at the imprints on the jeans. And Agent Bodziak did not say that he had any expertise in imprints on fabric. And Agent Diedrich said this was the first time he'd ever done anything like this before. But I submit to you what Dr. Lee said about the imprints on the jeans is simply this. And I think if you look at those parallel line imprints, you'll see they could be consistent with kicking from a shoe. When they're bunched up, all right, there was some imprints, Dr. Lee said, is accordion effect. It's just the bunching of the jeans, but it's three-dimensional. You bunch up.
I hate when your jeans bunch up.
An imprint occurs on it, and that's why some.
That's why pants are prison.
Are not.
Never wear jeans to a strip club.
Completely parallel.
You never get your money's worth.
To that 3-inch heel print in particular.
Flux. It was Steve. Steve did it. Hi, Flux.
Could be consistent with that kind of an imprint, but I really think it's inconsistent with, and. Agent Diedrich sort of gave it away that he'd never done this kind of analysis before, is this parallel lines from Mr. Goldman's shirt, because they were talking about a swipe, and you all saw what a swipe is. Swipe leaves
Swiper, no
smear.
swiping.
You can't swipe and leave those kinds of patterns like that on the jeans. It doesn't make any sense.
Have you seen the adult version they've done of that show?
There's this flailing and hitting of this fabric, and it's going to create those kinds of imprints. It's more
the illegal Mexican immigrant.
Flat, hard surface.
Can you say cocaine?
Three-dimensional folded up area.
Oh, no.
That's the jeans.
His channel, YouTube, not mine.
To the piece of paper and the envelope. We can have a debate about whether or not, based on this evidence, there are imprints before there's a lot of blood on the scene, the early imprints, There's no border, but that's not necessarily inconsistent with it not being a shoe print. Parallel line imprint. Agent Bodziak didn't look very hard for these kind of parallel line imprints. Put that aside. Put that aside. Let's go with what they said.
Swiffer, no dusting.
Agent Diedrich said, well, maybe that's from Mr. Goldman's jeans. And then he conceded that the most reasonable interpretation would be that Mr. Goldman fell once on the envelope area, if that's his gene imprint, and then again, or maybe once at the same time on the piece of paper out on the walkway. Well, that's not exactly consistent with the prosecution's theory about how these murders occurred, is it?
It's not.
So I don't think that gives them any real help here. And as to those shoe prints on the walkway that Dr. Lee discovered on June 25th, one is definitely a shoe print, no question about it. The other one, Agent Bodziak says, consistent with footwear. Well, you know, they haven't eliminated the police.
Amazing disgrace. It says it was done with a stabbing motion. Stabbing motion. Stabbing motion. Ear warning. Ear warning. Ear warning.
It is illustrative.
Incoming clip.
Not really.
This is called a stabbing motion. Stabbing motion. Stabbing motion.
The full scope of the evidence that two people could have done this crime on these facts is a fair inference. A lot of evidence to support that proposition.
Check, would this be a good time?
Sure.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our mid-afternoon break at this time. Remember, all my admissions will be in
My
business.
admonitions. All right. Well, that brings us up to the next section here. Let's bring up the next video real quick. What do we got going on here? We have Marv White's $2 super chat. He's the only super chat still here. Nothing to read. So cough, cough, cough. We can just continue. Where are we at? We've still got about 10, 12 minutes before we do our midstream grift. Present screen. And there we go. Embiggen. And take off the volume, mute, bump that back down to about 50% where it goes. Not 27%. Damn it. Good enough. All right, everybody, let's get back into this.
Taking his summation to the jury at this time. And Mr. Sheck, you may continue.
You may conclude.
Thank you very much. I realize these have been long days, and I really appreciate your patience and the way that you followed. I was inaccurate in a statement I made to you, and I want to correct it immediately. That had to do
when you said you'd be brief?
Hairs found on the Rockingham glove. Detective Furman, in checking the transcript at 34923, was in fact eliminated as the donor of that Caucasian hair, and that was an accuracy on my part. And anytime I've tried very hard to key everything to areas of the transcript, and obviously, Ms. Clark, I'm sure will bring any inaccuracies to your attention.
I'm sure she will.
Try very hard to do that, and you should have the testimony reread. You shouldn't misread things like I just did. Another thing I forgot to mention about the Rockingham gloves, however, both gloves, and that is that they found a limb hair. This Caucasian hair is not accounted for to anybody, but there is a limb hair that was found inside the glove.
What the hell's a limb hair?
Now, if
that grows on
Mr. Simpson
your
had
arms or
these
legs.
gloves for 4 years as the prosecution.
Oh, like limb, L-I-M-B. Okay.
Then there should have been more limb hairs. One thing that you saw, and when
It's like
you saw
L-I-M.
his
I'm like, what the hell's a
hands,
limb hair?
and that is that he has
A
a
limb
lot of
hair. Okay, got it.
on this part of his fingers. And if these gloves have been worn for 4 years, you would expect to find a lot more of this limb hair inside the gloves. But you don't find that. So that's another point to consider that I left out. One quick point here on, do you remember Ms. Clark talked about a blood drop that landed on Mr. Goldman's boot, number 78, that on RFLP testing turned out to be a mixture of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. And Detective Lang had offered a theory to you that this mixture could have occurred because one knife had committed both of these acts, and there was a combination or a mixture on the knife, and the blood drop fell and hit Mr. Goldman's boot there.
Okay, so now the knife did it.
Now, the
knife
first
committed the crime.
point to be made about
Exactly.
that is the photograph you were shown was Mr. Goldman's boot being lifted up at the time that his body was taken over into the walkway and the coroners were taking pictures of it. If you look back at the photographs and you see the way his shoe was configured. It would be.
But his shoe had settings?
That one drop of blood could hit because the shoe is at an angle. You couldn't have a drop that would fall in exactly that place in exactly that way, or it's extremely unlikely. But the other thing about this so-called mixture, mostly Nicole Brown Simpson and less of Ronald Goldman on the RFLP probes, is Dr. Lee addressed this, if you recall, when he pointed out the bag in which the boots were taken. Do you remember that?
No.
This was the wet transfer of blood coming through the bag here. When these boots are taken off and it's dragged into an area where there's blood from both victims, and then the wet blood is put into the bag, any kind of typing that you're going to get, if there's a drop on that area from a mixture, the DNA test is suspect when you handle the evidence in this fashion in terms of getting a mixture.
I think he's saying cross-contamination problems.
Yes.
That's what he seems to be saying
Now,
in a not so direct manner.
what's left in this analysis is the Bronco, the Rockingham glove, some short final remarks, and you'll be hearing from Mr. Cochran. The first point I'd like to make,
Hey, Daddy Cochran,
talk about the
bring it
bloodstain
on.
patterns in the Bronco, has to do with something that Ms. Clark said, first of all, about the blood drops in the foyer in Mr. Simpson's Rockingham residence. If you recall, in her closing argument, she said, and I don't know how could she say this in terms of the record, that the blood drops that were found in the foyer, you recall there were 3 that were recovered by LAPD, and then when Dr. Lee went back there, he found another 3 smaller cast-off type drops. And she said, well, those drops couldn't be made by a cut on the side of the finger, comparatively superficial cut on the side of the finger. Would have to be made with a major cut or that fish hook type cut, because that's their theory, right? That there's this fish hook type cut on the knuckle that nobody sees. Nobody sees. No one. On the way to Chicago. But Dr. Lee testified about this at page 43022 of the transcript. Question. And he's talking about the blood drop pattern in the foyer. And so if one had a superficial cut on the side of a finger and shook it in the fashion I'm doing, and then Mr. Sheck let the record reflect I'm shaking my hand down, does that create the cast-off pattern? Yes. And that would that be consistent with what you found here? Yes. And could the pattern that you found here be consistent with the superficial cut on the side of the finger? That's talking about all the drops. Answer was consistent with a small volume of blood. Is the pattern that you see here consistent with a major cut? No. So you have Ms. Clark's speculation, and then you have directly contradictory testimony by Dr. Lee, and there is no testimony in the record that supports her contention. It is mere speculation on her part. She is not a bloodstain expert, and I submit to you, you have to take the sworn uncontradicted testimony. Now,
Okay.
we know from what was said to Dr. Baden that in the course of getting things together on leaving, Mr. Simpson sustained a cut going into the Bronco, retrieving materials on his way out packing, and that it's the position of the defense that the bloodstains that you see and, well, briefly, why don't we take out that board? And I'll come back to it. This is the prosecution's bloodstain pattern in the Bronco board, if you recall it. Now, there are...
They're using the prosecution's evidence against them.
In the handle.
It's a bold strategy,
panel,
Cotton. Let's see where it goes.
Console, of course. And then these are other items. That's the footprint area. And on top of the windowsill, okay? The windowsill is somewhere around here. That are consistent, everybody agrees, with a cut to the left hand, somebody getting into the car, sitting down looking for something. Consistent with our theory, consistent arguably with their theory. But then when you start looking at the rest of the bloodstain patterns, you have to start asking which interpretation is reasonable. Now, the first point that has to be made, take this down for a second, is that, of course, initial deposits would be made by Mr. Simpson that evening. And then somebody else was in that Bronco. Now, we know someone else was in that Bronco.
Mark Furman.
It's been, I submit to you, demonstrated by the evidence. Let's take a look at this picture. Mr. Cochran has already reviewed with you the testimony of Mark Furman at the preliminary hearing, and you heard it on videotape where he said he found blood in the Bronco. A bit of a Freudian slip. But I submit to you one of the most significant moments has to do with the testimony of Dennis Fung and the blood stain patterns on the door sill of the Bronco. You recall that Detective Furman testified at the preliminary hearing at this trial.
Even the blood drops look scared.
Brush mark blood stain patterns on the door sill of the Bronco that he could observe when the door was closed. When Mr. Fung came in, he circled these pictures. And if you recall his testimony, the bottom circle closest to the door, that's only one stain. He said that that stain could be observed when the door was closed. But the other three stains that are represented by those other two circles could only be seen when the door was open. Could only be seen.
What, Furman lied? Furman, the genocidal racist, lied?
Evidence, he was in the Bronco. And it only makes sense that he would go in that Bronco. And how much credibility do you really put in that man's testimony?
Zero.
But here's evidence that he was in there. You know what other evidence there is? There's one of the most interesting facts, and it's hard scientific evidence that supports our position with respect to the bloodstain pattern in the Bronco, the steering wheel. You recall that the typing on the steering wheel was 1.1, 1.2, a genotype consistent with OJ Simpson, and 4. Who is the contributor of the 4 allele? That was an issue, and much was made of it in the case, was it not? Lots of cross-examination, lots of highlighting of that 4 allele in the steering wheel. And the prosecution well knew that it was the contention of the defense that Mr. Furman and or other officers had been in the Bronco. Doesn't take much to get a blood sample, or you just take a swab, and the testimony is you
Rico Suave.
You can do a quick DQ alpha test. What is
Rico
Mark Furman's genotype?
Swab.
We know that Andrea Mazzola and Dennis Fung, just like you do eliminations, their genotypes were taken, so we would know what they were. They are not consistent with the 4. None of them has the 4. They're eliminated. Why wasn't Mark Furman eliminated? Why didn't they take exemplars from the police on this? Why? But I think that a fair inference consistent with innocence, which you are under oath obliged to take, you must consider that Mr. Furman was in the Bronco. And the evidence is that a picture, around 4:30 in the evening, he is pointing at that glove at Bundy, walking through a pool of blood. Now, comes in to that Bronco, the vicinity of that Bronco, the area of 5 in the morning, right, initially. Then goes out and does his security.
Porcelain elimination. Back to Vince McMahon.
He's alone for 15 minutes, around 5:30. Now, there's very interesting testimony from Dennis Fung at page 21438 of the transcript about the ground.
Ground.
And he's talking here about Furman, and he's talking about arriving, Van Adder. He's talking about arriving initially at the Rockingham location. And he talks about how he was shown a red stain on the driver's door of the vehicle and a blood trail. And his question, okay, did you notice anything about the temperature at that time or the weather? Answer, it was fairly cool. What about the lawns? Did you notice anything that looked like it could have been dew on the lawns? Answer, I did notice there was some that the grass was wet. Question, all right. So Fung tells us that the grass is wet. But we know that there's no dew. We introduced into evidence under 1280.
And why do they have do-rags?
The weather, and when it was introduced, and you can take this back into the jury room, you can examine the areas that are highlighted in purple. The only thing it doesn't really make much of a difference to be tricky about is Professor McDonald explained all of this, that when you look at the time listing over here, it's standard time. So anytime you see a time, you have to add an hour. But when you look at the temperature and the dew point, you're going to see that the temperature was always many degrees above the dew point. So in other words, when you look through this, you'll see there's no dew. But the grass was wet. And you were at that location, and you noticed the sprinkler heads in the sprinkler system. And right in that area, that grass area where the Bronco was parked, there are 6 sprinkler heads. The grass, a fair inference, was watered regularly at that location. The grass was wet.
There is no try.
That's the fact. Now, if you have, as Agent Bodziak indicated,
that was funny. Come on.
That is caked on the inside of your shoe, even if loafers like Mr. Furman in the inside.
Sometimes it's funnier to leave you out on that ledge.
In your shoe, and then you walk through a wet area, and then you step onto the carpet, you're going to get the same kind of pattern that was testified to for the prosecution side in terms of the fibers going into the shoes and getting out blood that would be consistent with the genotype of Nicole Brown Simpson that is found on the carpet of the Bronco. Then we have the issue of the blood stain pattern on the console. Now, let me be precise, because when Mr. Cochran was showing you about the 7/10 of a drop of blood, I just want to make sure that
3/5 of a person telling about 7/10 of a blood drop.
Even the prosecutors with a quizzical look. But that happened, I think you recall, at the very end of the trial.
Fractions.
And that was a testimony of Gary Sims.
That was rude.
That he came back, he was testifying about the RFLP test.
I thought you were opening the door for all the jokes we make.
And I asked him a series of questions about combining all the stains. That is the collection on June 14th from the console of 30 and 31, then the August 26 samples, 303, 304, 305. And we talked about the amount of DNA that you would get, with one drop containing 1,000 nanograms of high molecular weight DNA. And then when he looked at the amount of DNA, when you combined all the samples, he said that it wasn't over 100. And question.
Nobody cares anymore.
1/10 of one drop of blood. That's what it is. 100 nanograms. 1/10 of one drop of blood. He said, qualified. He said, answer, well, you have to remember with a drop of blood, for example, if you were testing liquid blood, that is not the same as extracting DNA out of the stains worth of one drop of blood. So you're not quite talking apples. You are somewhat talking apples and oranges there, but in terms of the ballpark.
Shakes the Clown is one of the best movies ever.
Of that DNA out, so you can figure it from that. So
no, seriously. Awesome Shakes the Clown blast.
So what you're basically saying to us is that maybe if you're just dealing with a pristine drop of blood, you wouldn't get 1,000 nanograms, you get 750. Answer something like that. Is that what you just said in English? Answer yes, that's what I said. Okay, so if you're to summarize, and I mean no disrespect, so if we got about 100 nanograms of DNA and 750 nanograms in a drop of blood, can you give me that fraction quickly? That would be about a seventh. Answer something like that. Okay. So in other words, make it very, very simple. Hard science. When you combine the amount of DNA and you give them all favorable inferences, Gary Sims, their own witness, says, when you look at the smears of blood on the console, it's 7/10 of a drop. And now, how could that be, you're saying? Let's say it's a drop or two. How could that be? Well, that's because, as Dr. Lee explained, that when you have a...
Aren't you glad you didn't have to sit through 11 months of this?
Surface, it's
a little bit, yeah.
So it looks small amount of blood.
9 months of actual testimony.
And of course, Mr. Goldman's contribution to that 7/10 of a drop of blood is at the most 30-40%. That's very, very,
thankfully, I've dodged a couple of bullets when it comes to that.
And so then you have to
ask
yourself, does this make any sense? How could so little, even if we assume, how could so little be there? How could so little be there? Ms. Clark was trying to say, well, this is how the blood got there. We know the Rockingham glove had a lot of blood, mostly from Mr. Goldman.
Says, was there ever a sequel to Train to Busan? Yes, it's called Peninsula.
Of the console.
I know I could
So
look
that's
this
why
up,
we
but
get the little amount of Goldman's
I could look.
DNA that's on the
I could look, but this is a real Sheck show, and don't want to
Well, that's
step away. Yeah,
consistent with
it's called Peninsula.
Mr.
It's
Furman
the sequel
placing the
to
glove in there.
Train to Busan.
It's consistent with even Mr. Furman having handled the glove and getting blood on his sleeve and just searching around the area, or one of the other police officers, and just getting a small smear of it with his sleeve on the console. That's consistent with this evidence. And you know what isn't consistent with this evidence? Think about it.
OJ
What are
murdering
they
somebody?
really saying? If Mr. Simpson had committed these murders and he grabbed the glove, as they're saying, with his open left hand, all right, and placed it on the side, well, then in getting into the car, why aren't there mixtures on the window, right? On the window, and all those other drops, everything else, all those other blood stains. There's no trace of blood from either of the victims. There's no mixtures. Wouldn't there be other blood on the hands? And of course, their theory before you, this is extraordinary, is that
the jurors made $5 a
these
day
clothes
in this.
that we've
in this
just
case.
been through the evidence of struggle.
That's
If there's
rough.
blood on pants, it's going to be on the seat. If there's blood from the struggle with Goldman, it should be there. We know there's no hair, there's no trace, there's no fibers from clothing, there's no berries. There's nothing in that Bronco that would be consistent with somebody that had committed a violent double homicide, that had been in a life and death struggle with Mr. Goldman. It doesn't make one bit of sense. If you look at the bloodstain pattern in the Bronco, you have to have
It makes
a
no
reasonable
sense.
doubt about
Chewbacca
that.
defense.
And haven't we shown you by credible, fair, and reasonable evidence that this Detective Furman would have gone in that car and by his own testimony and exposed lies from the prosecution's own witnesses, there's evidence he was there. Those stains on the door sill give up the lie, don't they? He was in that car, and probably more than one of them was in that car. Now, with respect to the credibility of the evidence, very briefly, and I know you followed this, we have to make a distinction. You know, in our opening statement, Ms. Clark actually said to you that all she was going to talk about in her opening statement with respect to the Bronco were the stains that were collected on June 14th. She didn't even indicate they were going to offer you anything from after August 26th, because they know how terribly this was handled and that no jury could really accept the integrity of the evidence after this car was abandoned. But could we bring up the board, please, on the 13, I think it's 1351,
That was good fun, Dying. I'll give you that one.
the DNA board with the,
$5 was 2 packs of smoke back then. Smokes were under like $2 they were under $2
Very
a pack
briefly,
back then. It was
you
almost
recall
3
this.
packs.
And we made a distinction here. We have to look at the samples that were collected on June 14th and the samples that are collected on August 26th, as Dr. Gertie suggested to you. If you look at the June 14th DNA evidence, okay, with samples 30 and 31, nothing in 30, 31, they're calling this faint 1.3 allele, where the 1.3 is showing up in the controls. And you remember the whole business about development length and the notion of controls failing. This is it. From June 14th, this is it with respect to DNA from Mr. Goldman and the Bronco. That's it. And as Dr. Gertie's indicated to you, that is not credible scientific evidence. Of course,
man,
they're
wrap it up.
offering
My
you
ass is
evidence
falling
that was collected on August 26th. After this
Fun
vehicle was
dying.
literally abandoned.
The Train to Busan was
after
the
the no
sequel to
special
Soul
care
Station.
hold had been
Well,
taken off it.
Not
After
really. It
there
was
was a
a
theft. Now, Mr. Miraz, he wasn't.
it was
the
an
most
animated
credible witness on
prequel.
the issue of the theft,
Soul Station was the
but I
animated
really
prequel
think
to
that's
Train to
besides the
Busan.
point. Number one,
Wait, that was a real thing? I
he's
thought that was
stealing.
just a
He's
clever
inside
joke.
that car.
No,
What's going on?
Huh.
He didn't see blood, but you don't have to accept
it's an
Miraz.
animated deal.
What about Detective Moldorfer, who's investigating this? She doesn't see blood. And then there's Mr. Blazzini. He doesn't see blood on the console. And we know that there's all kinds of people allowed into this vehicle. And probably more disturbing than anything else, as Detective Moldorfer indicated, the rules are violated And there is no record kept of any authorized police personnel, going in and out of there.
That's where my mind
They
went.
could just go in and out and no records were kept and nobody would know, period. And all of a sudden, what we have
They do that
on
now
August
anyway.
26th, when the car is finally brought in, and Miss Clark said she must have misspoke when she tried to imply that the inspection of the Bronco was at the request of the defense. Those are not the facts. The facts are that they brought it in.
Hey, look.
Allowed the two defense people to observe.
Chick from Beetlejuice.
And then Michelle Kessler looks in the vehicle, and there's a photographer that was brought down from Life magazine at the behest of the police commissioner to witness this grand examination of the Bronco. And lo and behold, they find as much blood on the console on August 26th
decades ago. Who was reading Life magazine?
as there was on June 14th. And then when they do the DNA testing patterns, they find not only traces of Mr. Goldman's blood, but Nicole Brown Simpson's blood in those same areas. That is awfully odd. So the integrity of the evidence, again, is in question here in terms of what you can accept beyond a reasonable doubt. But even if you're willing to look aside from that, and I don't really think that one can, in fairness, I think that the defense version of how the blood got there and the blood stain pattern in the Bronco is far more plausible than the prosecution's version. It just doesn't fit. There would be mixtures on all those stains, according to their own theory. There should be more blood in the Bronco, given what occurred in this case. The blood stain patterns don't make sense, do they? They really don't. And nor does the hair and fiber in that Bronco. Now, let's talk about the glove. The first point to be made about the glove is an integrity issue. And that is that you recall that when Mr. Yamauchi opened up the reference tube in the morning and spilled out the blood,
The worst drawing
first
of
thing he
gloves
did
I've ever
after
seen in my
that
life.
was this examination of
Good
the
Lord.
Rockingham glove. And as you recall, he was putting his initials in, he was doing all these pheno testing, these manipulations, all in the wrist area of the glove and manipulating it. There is so little DNA in these few areas here from the D1S80 tested, minuscule nanogram amounts, very, very small, consistent with a small sample handling transfer from Mr. Yamauchi. And that alone, I think, can explain the small amount of DNA on the glove. But of course, under the other scenarios, the competing scenarios of the defense and the prosecution, if the Rockingham glove was up against the side of the console, that certainly would, of course, explain a small transfer of Mr. Simpson's blood into the heel area of the glove. But you know what doesn't make sense? What doesn't make sense is their theory. First of all, the tight glove is thrown off from the left hand in the course of the struggle. But they're saying that with a bleeding cut, the fish hook on the knuckle, which nobody sees on the way to Chicago, and blood on this hand, the gloves are taken off. Can they really suggest to you that gloves are taken off at the wrist? I'm from back East Brooklyn. You know, I wear a lot of gloves. You may not have as much experience. But think about it. You don't take gloves off like this. You take them off like that.
Did he just admit to being in the mob?
And you know what? That's exactly what the criminalists were
he's
thinking.
a digger.
That's what Gary Sims was thinking. Even Mr. Yamauchi was
That doesn't help the case.
because most of the initial DNA testing all was done looking for blood on the fingers, top fingers of the glove, because that's all that makes sense. And there was nothing there. And that's got to give you, I would submit, a reasonable doubt.
Sit down. Sit down, Barry.
So what I've tried to do in my remarks
Thank you. End it.
is review with you essential pieces, circumstantial evidence of the prosecution's case. And we don't have to do that. We don't have the burden of proof in this case. And each essential piece,
That'd be my third
I
gin
think
tonic.
it's fair to say there's a reasonable doubt. And some of these are so profoundly disturbing in terms of the manufacturing of evidence in this case that I'm sure you really can't abide it. Not in this country, not in this democracy, can we allow dishonest, manufactured evidence to lie at the heart of a case like this. It cannot be. You cannot trust. I mean, you cannot go back and say, well, maybe they planted evidence on the glove.
You're going to keep talking
maybe
until
on the
super
back
chats
gate.
come in.
Oh, there's blood missing. Big deal. How can that be a big deal? There's many, many reasonable doubts embedded in all of that. But, you know, there's a fourth C. Contaminated, compromised, and corrupted. But there's a fourth C that goes along with how these things happen that relates to this forensic testimony.
Fourth C.
And the fourth C has to do with cover-up.
Oh, sorry.
And I'm not even talking about
You might want to edit that.
statements of the police officers and the cover-up of Mr. Furman that Mr. Cochran has discussed with you so eloquently in the last 2 days. Let's just talk a little bit about the criminalists and what you can view in terms of that evidence and how that affects on their credibility. Because if you lie in small things, and some of these are not so small things, you lie in big things. And if you're trying to turn the other way and cover up real problems, serious problems, you can't abide it. Now, one I alluded to early, and I just think it goes to the heart of the hair and fiber evidence in so much in this case. And your common sense tells you. They moved Mr. Goldman's body. They were traipsing around that crime scene. And we know the envelope was moved, and we know the glove was moved, and somebody put it back. And remember, Mr. Fung, they actually have a form. If the scene was altered, you know, describe how. And Mr. Fung says, it's not my job. We don't ask. Detective Lang, do you know? I don't know. Did anybody ask Jacobo or Ratcliffe, the coroners? Did anybody come in and do an investigation? Isn't it important to know who's moving around this evidence, that they're going to come in and make a big deal about hair and fiber and other things? Don't we have to know that? Isn't that just fair dealing with you? And how can, I mean, they're covering this up. They're covering up how miserably this was handled and how the integrity of the evidence was compromised. It's as plain as day. It's an insult to your intelligence to say otherwise. Why? They have a responsibility to come in here and do that. And we looked at videos where I submit to you there's a glove on the blanket that somebody put back. And then there was the testimony, you know, Detective Lang said, and if this isn't covering, I don't know what is. Well, why did you move the bodies? Why did you wait so long to bring the criminalists in? Why did you move the bodies before you collected the evidence? Because that's lunacy. And the answer was, this is what you call a closed-in crime scene. And in a closed-in crime scene where the evidence is close to the bodies, the first thing you do is move the bodies. That was a makeup. It was nonsense.
Yeah, they drug Mark Furman's corpse through the crime scene, and to make sure that everything stayed where it was. They moved the envelope with the glasses in it. They moved the glove. They moved something else. They drug the body through the crime scene, and then they put the glove and the glasses and the other evidence back approximately where it was before they moved.
Oh, good God.
Yeah.
As all the other criminals who came in here and testified, even Mr. Fung couldn't abide that because it's covering for mistakes. Now, another one is just the whole way it went. Mr. Fung, when he testified in the grand jury,
Goldman's corpse?
And initially at the preliminary hearing, he forgot Andrea Mazzola was there with him because she was a trainee and she played a big role in this case in handling the evidence, and they wanted to forget it ever happened. And you know, that's the way it was. And, you know, when I asked him, well, was there any concern in the lab about this before you went to testify?
LC in the house. What's up, Lincoln King?
It's just this habit I have of saying I when I mean we.
Thank you.
It's a habit of testifying. But, you know, when Ms. Kessler came here, she was actually asked by Mr. Neufeld, was there any discussion before Mr. Fung testified in the grand jury about what went on in this case? And they said, well, there was some concern that Ms. Mazzola was listed on the forms as the officer in charge. And I think that tells you all you need to know. Of course they were concerned about that because they realized that the whole scene.
No, there are original pictures of the scene.
Miserably botched.
That's how they knew they were moved.
And there was serious
They're like, here's the pictures. Here's the other pictures. You moved these, didn't you? No. You moved these, didn't you? Okay, we moved them.
Handoff of the envelope. And just as a quality of testimony. I mean, Mr. Fung said, oh, I wouldn't take that envelope, pick up that envelope with my bare hands. And then we showed it to him on videotape where he's picking up the envelope with his bare hands. And then he goes, well, that couldn't have happened because the coroner, Mr. Cobo, wasn't there. So I have the timing right.
Well, we have to pause this because we've had a very, very special development here. We have our second super chat of the evening with here's my 2 cents. We've got the South African currency going here.
Hey,
14 of them. Crystal Pontek, thank you so much. That means we're like $96 away from unleashing Doggo Cam. Oh, there you go. All right, thank you so much for the second super chat of the evening. He's going to keep talking until we get more super chats. I swear to God.
Still there. Well, there's something wrong with the quality of testimony like that. There's something wrong when Ms. Mazzola conveniently begins to close her eyes because problems arise on how the trash bag is carrying this blood vial out sitting on the couch. There's problems with the whole trash bag story. There's problems. There's an extraordinary problem with Ms. Mazzola suddenly forgetting that her initials
We
are on
want
the
Johnny. We want Johnny. Bring Johnny Cochran
The
on.
testimony is that they were there and something's wrong. So when something's wrong, people's memories get selective and testimony comes in funny ways.
Wrap it
Dr.
up.
Goldman, the coroner, never showed up. Mr. Martz destroyed his underlying digital data and didn't save much of the data. Mr. Martz stopped looking in terms of testing. Mr. Rubin stopped looking pretty early. We have an EAP exclusion on the fingernails that they're desperately trying to change. And then, of course, there's Ms. Kessler can't even remember the substance of the meetings that were had early in the case.
You don't have to talk about every witness that they've called for the last 9 months.
And then that was remarkable. Remember when Ms. Kessler, when we were talking about looking for blood on the sock, and it said blood search not obvious? And then remember that testimony? Well, that wasn't a blood search. Well, it says blood search right here. Well, that wasn't a blood search. I mean, some of it was remarkable. And then, of course, there's the Thano Paradas tape.
Hey, been there, done that. Welcome aboard.
There's a lot of it. I'm sure you remember more than I've just listed.
So don't list anymore, please.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I thank you very much for your patience. I've tried to reason through this evidence, drawing the fair inferences as best we could, looking at the integrity of the evidence. And I just think there's very little question here, is there? So much of the essential facts in this case are just shot through with reasonable doubt. There is something wrong.
Shot through the heart
There's
with reasonable
something terribly
doubt.
wrong about this evidence. Somebody manufactured evidence in this case. There's missing blood. There's EDTA. There's questions, serious, deeply troubling questions. You must distrust it. You have to distrust it. You cannot render a verdict in this case of beyond a reasonable doubt on this kind of evidence. Because if you do, no one's safe. No one. The Constitution means nothing. This cannot, will not, shall not happen in this country with you good people. It just won't. Thank you very much.
Oh, we get some Johnny Cochran now. Good deal. Johnny Cochran's going to take us here for the next little bit. Thank you, Johnny Cochran. Okay, we've got to do like a quick 2-minute grift here. Let you know who was going. And we're happy to see Lincoln Kane here. It's been a minute since we've had a Lincoln Kane sighting. What's up, brother? How you doing? You're up awfully damn late. All righty, folks. Hayden, I think you need to grift yourself.
Oh, well, what can I say? It's been a little while since I've even bothered to grift for anything, really. You know what? I'll even go so far as doing this. How are we doing, peeps? Yes, ignore the lines under the eyes, okay? Aussie Overlord, YouTube, Twitter, X, Rumble occasionally.
He looks like Hugh
yeah.
Jackman there. He looked good. Like a Hugh Jackman.
I don't believe you, but thank you. So what I'm doing at the moment is, ordinarily we've got the 6 p.m. Eastern show, Law, News and Laughter, going through funny news articles, law, all sorts of stuff at the moment, railing about the stuff going on in Texas. But this morning we started the Adam Montgomery trial, which might just be one of the most harrowing murder trials that I've had to sit through. 5 minutes before the jury left on a view today, he pled guilty to abuse of a corpse and falsifying evidence. He's still up on murder 2 and assault charges for his 5-year-old daughter. That one's rough, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna be back at that tomorrow. I am following it a day behind so that we can fast forward through lunch and through various things that don't really matter. But yeah, I'll see you all then in... Ooh, actually, what time is it? Holy crap, it is 2:30 in the morning, so 6.5 hours.
Woohoo! All right. Is that Jason Momoa or Hayden? It looks like Hugh Jackman. Got to make sure you go to Aussie Overlord and subscribe to his channel and like every video he's ever done and watch him all the time. Good peeps.
Well, better yet, give me ideas as to what you would like to actually see, because mine are midlife crisis, so if there's things that you guys would actually like to see me cover, or you got ideas, throw them in the comments.
Or would you rather see him uncovered?
Oh, God. No one wants to see that.
Okay. As for me, of course, you know I'm Legal Vices. I'm Jeff. I'm here. You're here, so you know all that stuff. Tomorrow, Friday evening, we're going to be doing like a chill stream, a catch-up stream. Where do we sit on all the unresolved trials? YNW Melly, what's going on there? What's going on with not Business. I haven't thought about her in a minute. Just mentioned her a while ago. Courtney Clenny. What's going on with Sarah Boone? Karen Reed. We'll do a little bit of an update, a little bit of a chill stream. That'll be Friday evening as usual, because we don't do Friday stream or morning streams. Then next Monday, hopefully a Maritime Monday deal, and we'll keep going on through next week. And probably the next trial we're going to cover will be the Hannah Gutierrez Reed trial. It's supposed to start the end of this month. So that's probably the next trial. That's the armorer in the Rust shooting trial. That's probably the next trial we'll be doing. And speaking of next trials, once we finish OJ in a couple of weeks, take our like, subscribe, and vote polls, and you can help determine what the next trial we watch to replace OJ on Thursdays is. So far, only 9% of you want to watch the faith-healing urinary tract murder. Well, now 10% want to see it. 10% want to see the faith-healing urinary tract murder. 20% of you want to see the attempted Korean sister murder. That was winning at one point. Damn it. That's actually a really good case. The attempted Korean twin sister murder, that's 20%. 28% of you want to see the dismembering the parents case. And 42%, nearly 50% of you want to see the triple family witchcraft murder. So unless something drastic happens in the next hour, it'll be the triple family witchcraft murder we watch next. Like and subscribe, everybody. And come on. All right, that's it. Shall we jump back into the trial? Let's jump back into the trial.
Let's do it to it.
We have a super chat. No, it's not a super chat. It's just a regular start thing. Alan Walsh says, Jeff, you need to try Alfred Button's Dandelion and Rosehip. That's a gin. They don't have it here in Korea, unfortunately. The closest they would probably have would be Hendrix, because Hendrix is rosehip based too. Put it in the freezer, slush it up, add a dash of lemonade. If heaven has a taste, this is what it is. I'll tell you what. I'll look for a bottle, Alan Walsh, as soon as you can pronounce purple burglar alarm. Apparently, Scottish people can't pronounce that.
They can't.
Change over here. Just 3 minutes or so. All right. Ladies
hey, look.
Let me ask.
We have to do our thing. This is the guy that's right here at this table. We have the people that are responsible for all of the Kardashians. The guy here with the skunk stripe, that is Robert Kardashian, father of at least a few of the Kardashians. And sitting next to him is the defendant, OJ Simpson, who may be the father of the other Kardashian. So there you go. Blame it on this guy. Blame the whole Kardashian thing on this guy right here with the skunk stripe in his hair.
You just step back into the jury room, probably be about 5 minutes. Let the
Burglar
record
alarm,
reflect
fuck
that
you.
we've now been rejoined by all our jury members. And Mr. Cochran, you may make your concluding remarks.
Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Ito, again to my colleagues.
This is what an orator is.
Good afternoon. Again, ladies and gentlemen. Seems like we did this yesterday. But I won't be nearly as long this time.
As Barry Sheck was.
I'm back, as I promised you I'd come back, to try and wrap up the defense discussion of the evidence with you. You just heard what I believe
wish
was
Megan
a
was here. Then she
remarkable
could
discussion
shame people. We don't even have minimum
by
wage
Mr.
yet.
Barry Sheck, an excellent lawyer. He may be from Brooklyn, but he's become a Californian as far as we're concerned. He is a very valued member.
He's the token
of
white
my team
guy
of
on the
defense
team.
lawyers for Mr. OJ Simpson. And you see why. This is indeed a talented lawyer. And so he shared with you a number of things, which I will not be redundant about and go over. You have them clear in mind. And if I were not to say anything else, there are many reasonable doubts in this case, and OJ Simpson is entitled to an acquittal based on what we have told you.
Bernice, her and her husband share the same birthday. How wild is that? 55, he's 71. Oh, that cradle robbing man. Yeah, he's just robbing the cradle. Bernice Conklin. Happy birthday to you and your cradle robbing husband. Cheers. Birthday shot for all of you.
This is my last chance, of course, to speak to you, and I want to take this time to tell you again.
This is the last shot the defense gets.
Because they bear the burden. Proving this case beyond a reasonable doubt, we'll have the opportunity to speak to you last. We may not be here too late tonight because I'm not going to be much longer, and I think
equality of the $2. No, mom shame,
this
please.
Case is going to get to you.
That's one way to stave it off.
So you can kind of sit back and relax. It's been a long, long, long road to get to this point. It's been kind of like a relay race, hasn't it been, in many respects, in this journey toward justice? The prosecution was first.
Equality just gifted 5 Legal Vices memberships. If you are one of the amazing people that got who got the gifted memberships, it was Daily Quick Bite, 77 Mechanic, Paralegal Liz got one, and Tony Tries. Super. That's only 4. Where'd number 5 go? Fire and Ice got one too. Give our good old equality a super special thanks.
Running with it. We then took the baton and we started.
Island also says, "Thank you so much for the support. Not quite awake yet, but Jeff, I appreciate you. I appreciate you.
And soon,
you're good people.
We're going to pass the baton to you. This is how our system works. This is what makes it so great. We pass the baton to you, and we'll be glad we can then sit back and watch you at work. You watched us for a year.
Jesus. A year.
2 or 3 days.
Bloody hell.
Now we get to watch you. It'll be symbolically watching you because we won't see you back.
Well, you only get to watch him for 4 hours.
We're going to be counting on you, giving both sides.
Took 4 hours to find him not
your
guilty.
Individual opinion. Now it's your time to perform. You know how you could think about us in those days when you want to criticize us. We're not going to criticize you, though. We're going to just watch you work. And watching you work is what makes this country so great. Because it's 12 citizens, good and true, coming together from this community from disparate backgrounds. Experience not required. Citizenship, the only requirement. To do justice, to do right, to right some wrongs, to straighten this out.
Here he goes. He's getting.
That's what we're asking you to do.
Animated.
I forgot to put the
law,
hallelujah sound clip on it.
Determine the facts and come to a well-reasoned decision. That's what's going to happen tomorrow afternoon for you. Now, it may take 1 day or 100 days, but you've been committed. I know that you'll stay the course. Keep your eye on the prize and do the right thing. Now, when I sit down this time, I won't get another chance to argue to you.
I sit down. I don't get up again.
Because it has to stop sometime. But Ms. Clark gets to talk to you later tonight or tomorrow. And I want you again to use your common sense. And remember, if she raises some point, I may not be able to get up and respond, Mr. Sheck or I. If it's something that's not purely rebuttal, you may see more objections this time because we got to keep it in line. But if it's a point
Keep that white
we
woman in
can't
line,
respond
Johnny.
to, you substitute your wisdom and
Keep the
common
pimp hand
sense
strong.
as to any point. I think you know by this time we can answer anything that they would say. So I'm sure you'll give her the same attention you've given us today, and I wish them good luck. In fact, let me say this. In this case, we have been advocates. We have fought hard, I hope. But it's not personal. What is personal is this case. What is personal is our zeal and our desire that our client be acquitted. It's not personal against these prosecutors.
What is personal is I took this case on contingency.
Ooh, we almost got it. We almost
In this part,
we almost got a Donald
of our
Sutherland
discussion,
sighting.
I want to share a couple of things with you and clear up a couple of things if I might. Remember, I was examining Detective Lang, and it was interesting that we saw Detective Lang here today. That's interesting, isn't it?
Oh, almost got another
Detective
sighting
Lang
from
was
Donald
here.
Sutherland. Damn it.
He's the only one who can really come anymore.
What?
Very nice.
We discussed the roles of these people. It's the only one who's going to show us.
That's how I want to be remembered in my old age. That's exactly how I want to be remembered in my old age. Let's go back in here. This is what I want written on my. This is what I want written on my
Saw
tombstone.
Detective Lang here today. That's interesting, isn't it?
This
Detective Lang was here. He's the only one who can really come anymore.
I want that on my
We discussed
tombstone.
The roles of these people. It's the only one who's going to show his face here. You can count on. But Lang says that early on that they had. I asked him questions about traveling around the world to investigate this case to get an idea
missed that the first
what
time.
resources were they putting on this case. You remember right at the very outset the reason
Make a brighter
that
day for you and me. I
Robbery
actually
homicide
watched
was
the
put on case was
documentary of the
because
making this,
downtown, they supposedly had
the
better
making of that
resources.
song on
There's some doubt
Netflix
about
right
that,
before
but
I came on
they did that.
online here.
And they put resources,
We are
including
the world.
everybody in the LAPD.
It's actually a really good documentary, especially if you're like an '80s person like me. The We Are the World documentary. Great show. I literally watched the documentary on that right before we came online here. So yeah, thanks LC for mentioning that. We are the world. We are the people. Anyway,
They had the DA's office and their investigators. They've had the FBI. They've been all over the world. You know, they've been everywhere looking for Bruno Magli's shoes. They've been to Italy. They've been to many of the states in the United States. And I asked them about those things to give you a scope of what they were trying to do. And, you know, it's awesome, the power of the state. And at one point I worked as the assistant district attorney, so I know about power of the state. There's no priority to being on this side. I used to be on this side. You can be on both sides. You perhaps gives you a little different, a balanced perspective.
You heard it here first, people. Johnny
But they have a
Cochran
lot of
swings both
power.
ways.
They can do a lot of things.
you did.
They have a lot of resources.
You know, unless you're
And
paying
they've
attention
used
to this
them in this
decades ago.
case. So don't feel sorry for them. They've used every resource they had. When they didn't call people, there was a reason for it. It wasn't they didn't have the resources.
Well, I'm just trying a new skin
These are
regime.
excellent lawyers. They know the facts. If they didn't disprove something, if they couldn't disprove Henry Lee, if they didn't call anybody for John Gerdes, it's because they couldn't find anybody. Earlier, I talked to you about Detective Furman on this particular point. I wanted to
Ooh,
make sure so we could be as accurate as
let's
possible.
talk about Furman some more.
This question was asked by Bailey. There is a problem that has been brought to your attention, isn't there, Detective Furman? Answer, no. Question, when discussing this event in the preliminary hearing and talking about the glove, your tongue slipped and you said them, didn't you? Answer, yes.
That is
Your tongue
true.
slipped and you were deep in shit.
LC says no need to post his link mods. It's all cool. But no, you just post the shit out of his link because Lincoln Kane's good peeps. Lincoln Kane is very good peeps. So make sure you keep blasting that link. But no, that was the thing. There was one glove at the crime scene, one glove at OJ's house, and Mark Furman, who was testifying because he's been accused of planting the second glove at OJ's house. When he talked about seeing the crime scene, he said when he was talking about the gloves, he said them. When he was talking about the glove at the crime scene, he said he saw them.
Oh, interesting.
And that's when Bailey's like, we got a problem here, don't we? So yeah, that's what he was talking about right there.
Them, didn't you? Answer, yes. In case there was any question about what we'd said earlier, Mr. Sheck has covered the brush marks on the door, but what I'd like for you to do is look back at your notes, because Furman said that regarding these brush marks, he said he saw these marks on that door while the door of the Bronco was closed, remember? The reason why this has become so important was he was trying to say he hadn't gotten inside. Then we called Larry Regal, who said you couldn't see the ones at the top unless the door was open.
Welcome,
and then
Janet.
Furman also had said that he told Fung about these brush marks. If you look at Fung's testimony, I think you'll find that Fung
To be fair, Daily Quick Bites, so do I.
never
But
says
that's for
that he
completely
heard
different
that
reasons.
from Furman. And so, with regard to Furman, I could have gone on and on and on about lies, but that would be counterproductive after a while, because you know who he is now. There's one other point I wanted to share with you about Furman before we take our leave of him, is that there was some questions in counsel at 18906 about opportunity for Detective Furman. Here was a series of quick questions. When you arrived at the scene this night, were you wearing a coat, a jacket of some sort? When I first arrived at the scene, yes. Can you describe it? Answer, a blue blazer. All right. And you were wearing the trousers and shirt that we see you in with your weapon in the picture pointing at the left-handed glove. Yes, tan slacks. Okay, now, at some point, did you walk back to your vehicle and take off your blazer and hang it to lay in the vehicle somewhere? Yes, sir. Okay. Can you tell the court and jury about what time of day that happened? Bearing in mind that you arrived at about 2:10, that's a.m. It would be after I was relieved from the case. Now, he's relieved a short time after he gets there. He's relieved by 3 o'clock, isn't he? Before 3 o'clock. All right, that would be close to 3 o'clock? Yes, sir. Question, and that is when you walked back to the vehicle, left the jacket, and stood waiting for your relief? Yes, sir. Now, I don't believe hardly anything he says, except that it is true that in this photograph taken at 4:30 or before sunrise, the one you saw where he's pointing at the glove, he doesn't have a jacket on. So he had a jacket, went to that car by himself. There's many things in that car. This man had ample opportunity to get up to that scene. As I told you, it's so stretches the credulity to believe that so neatly placed were this knit hat and this glove. Were there two gloves at some point? When he says, I saw them, I would just say them. There weren't two gloves. And, it's so unusual because everything else is spread all out. This was a vicious fight.
That was a good
There was
docu. That was a good
keys over
documentary.
there, but these items are right there, right where you could point at them. It's two-pack.
Tupac Shakur.
So you can ask yourself those questions.
Tupac.
Go back.
Not one pat.
That jury.
Tupac.
Now, in this case, I discussed with you Miss Juanita Moore, a lady that I called to the stand, and I think I misspoke myself. I think I mentioned to you that I may have said, she said that Mr. Simpson did not have dandruff, and I did say that. I got that wrong. She said that Mr. Simpson would get dandruff, I think, in the off season, in the spring and summer when he was here, as opposed to when he was in New York. And I wanted to make sure, in looking at the transcript over the lunch hour, I noted that. Ms. Clark seemed to be amazed when Mr. Sheck said that Kelly Moldorfer said she didn't see blood in that Bronco. So to save her some time, I'm going to read you the transcript.
Do that for
Kelly
us.
Moldorfer at 38268. Lines 26 through line 9, I think of 38269. Question, and when you looked at the console, do you remember seeing any blood there? Answer, no, I don't have any specific recollection. That's the lady, the investigator, who was looking at this. And so now we come to some jury instructions, which I think have some real relevance as we conclude this case, hopefully. We've already talked about a witness willfully false. We've talked an awful lot. You now know a lot about circumstantial evidence, and I dare say you know the difference between direct and circumstantial evidence.
Are you circumstantialized?
We'll talk further about that. You know what happens where the proof circumstances.
I decline to answer pursuant to my non-existent Fifth Amendment rights.
One of which points to innocence, the other which points to guilt. Where they're both reasonable, you must adopt that which points to innocence. You understand that. You understand about circumstantial evidence. So enough about that. And we've displayed this, and we talked about how this works and how it inures to the benefit of the defendant because there's this burden of proof. But there's another instruction which I want to talk to you about now, and this is one that where the prosecutors keep wanting to change things around and ask what we proved and what we didn't do.
Yeah. Yeah, they did a little bit of that burden shifting.
The prosecution has the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt each element of the crimes charged in the information, and that the defendant was a perpetrator of any such crimes. There's no doubt about that among any of us, is it? The defendant is not required to prove him or herself innocent or to prove that another person committed the crimes charged. So now, if that's what the law is, and the judge gave you that,
that's just a meme. That's not a real thing. If you watch the documentary, you'll see he was that. We was that way.
Why would he ask that? When the judge just said.
He and Huey Lewis were laughing.
And we know in this case, they rushed to judgment. They didn't look at anybody else. That's a question he should be asking these detectives, not us. We're the ones who had the preeminent experts who wanted to help out. They wouldn't accept them. Could he ask us that question? How could he ask us that question in good faith? So what the answer is, you go ask your detectives.
Solid, based.
That's the answer. Now, he asked another question. He said, well, where was OJ Simpson? And he says, well, you know, how does he account for his whereabouts after 10 o'clock? Well, let me just take a minute about this. He asked that question. So let me answer it for you and for him. Some of you in your former life probably lived alone. If you lived alone, if something happened between 10 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the morning, it's real difficult if you live alone to prove where you were if nobody lives there with you. Isn't that true? Is that common sense? Mr. Simpson lived alone. But we've done more than that. We can establish where he was. He was at home. That Bronco was outside. He was packing and getting ready and rushing around at the last minute and coming outside to that Bronco, getting his phone, getting the paraphernalia for that phone. That's what he was doing. He was packing. He was getting the golf balls, the golf bag out of his car that was seated out there. He was getting golf shoes and whatever goes with golf if you're a golfer. That's what he's doing. He's getting this little knapsack out that has golf balls in it. And he was bringing another bag down, all of which were ready when Park, Cato were out there. And he comes
Denise
down.
Conklin, member for 8 months. Thank you for the support. It says, hi, Jeff. Hope all is well. All is great. Thank you so much.
Mr. Darden, that's where he was. It's your speculation. He's on the side of his house running into an air conditioning. That didn't happen. That's unreasonable. Nobody here believes it. It's not going to help save their case. They're speculating again. Speculating. Cynically speculating. And it's not going to work. And so that brings me to this other instruction. It's called alibi. You remember during voir dire, I asked you about this. I said that you won't place a bad connotation on the term alibi. That's what the law calls it, alibi. And it says as follows, that evidence has been received for the purpose of showing that the defendant was not present at the time and place of the commission of the alleged crime for which he is here on trial. If after a consideration of all the evidence, you have a reasonable doubt that the defendant was present at the time the crime was committed, you must find him not guilty. Can I repeat that last part for you?
Well, he's repeating that. Crystal
If after
Pontiac, member for 11
consideration
months,
of
says,
all
thanks for
the
taking away my
evidence,
reason to live, Jeff. I'm
you
going to
have
miss
a reasonable
OJ.
doubt
Oh, we're not.
that the defendant was present.
Stay tuned. After this, we've
The
got,
time
looks
the
like we've got the
crime was
triple
committed.
family witchcraft murder
Doesn't say
trial.
you might find him not guilty. You might think about it. It says you must find him not guilty. And so, you know, when you talk about this whole concept of reasonable doubt, and we'll talk a little more about that, it's how you feel inside about this evidence. It's how you feel inside about these messengers and their message. It's when you have that queasy feeling. You can't trust this evidence. Barry Sheck described it well as a cancer. He talked about one cockroach you don't need to see anymore, because you know if you see one, there's a lot of them around. All you need is one, and that's going to make you go the other way. In this case, you don't have to get past the socks. But then you get to the glove and the Bronco, and you get to all of it, none of which you can trust. And then how do you do it? Do you get back there and say, well, I don't trust him on this. I think I can trust him on that. When these essential link in the chain is broken, you got reasonable doubt. And so your job won't be quite as tough as you may have thought. Reasonable doubt? In this case, the prosecution has not offered one coherent theory to explain how these deaths occurred. I won't talk about thanatophoritis and the desperation that brought about, but let me talk to you about this whole concept of what took place in this case. One of the things that was intriguing to me, and I'm sure you've thought about it, and I know that your collective minds are far better than mine and Mr. Sheck's, but you know, we think about things that'll be helpful to you. You know, one of the things that's always troubled me about the prosecution's case is, you probably thought about this, Cato the dog was purchased by OJ Simpson after the other dog died. Remember, Arnell told you about how they had to bury the dog, and it was a real tough time for the kids and all. OJ had that dog, Cato, along with Chachi, the other dog, over at Rockingham. And he let his son have the dog because they named the dog after Cato, who is now living over with OJ Simpson. That dog knows OJ Simpson. It's his dog. He bought the dog. They didn't know this as they were speculating. It's his dog. If OJ Simpson had been the one there that night, that dog would have followed him out the back gate. He wouldn't be going out the front. Those paw prints wouldn't be going out that way and down the sidewalk saw. That's common sense. They said, use your common sense. They make sense to you. The other thing is, the one thing that you can count on in this case is these two people, even when they weren't getting along, loved their children. And their children loved them. Whether it was pediatric AIDS affairs, whether it was recitals, whether it was sunshine preschool affairs, just look at the month of May, the things that you heard that OJ Simpson went to. Always on the weekend because he was traveling. Wasn't no fuse, he was out of town working. He was the breadwinner. So whether it was the pediatric AIDS or something for his children's school at 400 people over at the Rockingham estate, he was always there for the kids. If it meant coming back from Chicago on Friday or from wherever he was in New York,
now
on
they
Friday
blur
to
the
go back
kid.
to Chicago on
So
Sunday
soon.
to go back for an engagement. He came home. He came home because his little girl was having a concert. That's the kind of dad he is, and somebody has to stand up for him. People don't want you to stand up for him. People can't stand the truth, but they're going to hear truth in here. There's one place you can't take away somebody's voice, and that's in the courtroom. When you want to tell the truth. For 16 months, this man sat over here and heard people talk about him day in and day out, judged him and prejudged him against the American way. What right? How dare them do that?
Hallelujah.
And he has one day
Preach it, Brother
or
Johnny.
2 days to have somebody stand up for him. And people are crying and moaning. It's outrageous in America. It's intolerable, if you will.
Preach.
And so this is a good and decent man. Loves his family, loves his kids. None of us are perfect. But he's a man who went a long, long way. Raised primarily by his mother, you know what he did with his life. He had a good life, a wonderful life. He's done well.
Mary, that's a
Not
wonderful
going to
life.
give all that up? Try and kill somebody with a knife? He's not going to give that up. And you know what? As you think about this case, can you imagine that a man who loves his children so much is going to go over, kill his ex-wife, kill their mother, and leave her so that the children can come downstairs and find her? That defies credulity. None of you believe he would do that. It's contrary to everything that you can believe and that you've heard about this man and what he's done and what he's done with his life.
Shanny
So
dropping the 10 Legal
if
Vices
I
memberships.
speak
Thank
out
you
for
so
O.J.
much,
Simpson, if I'm
Shanny.
so presumptuous as to believe
Everybody.
the Constitution means that you're
Everybody
presumed to be
that got
innocent
one of these
until
10
you make the
Vices
decision.
memberships.
Nobody outside
give
here has
Shanny a
vote.
super
You
special
have that
thanks.
vote, thank heaven. These narrow-minded people, thank heaven they don't have a vote. You will have the final say. And so, this concept then of reasonable doubt. What then does it mean? We've heard about it. We've talked about it. We have a chart. I'm going to ask Mr. Douglas to put over there. Let's talk about this whole idea of burden of proof and reasonable doubt and what is reasonable doubt. You remember during voir dire, I talked to you about this concept of reasonable doubt. And before we go to that chart, I mean, it's that state of the case after the entire comparison and consideration of the evidence leaves the minds of the jury in that condition where they cannot say they feel an abiding conviction of the truth of the charge. That's what reasonable doubt is. And let's go over it one more time because this is the cornerstone of every criminal case. What it really is a doubt based upon a reason. In this case, we have given you myriad reasons. There are many, 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 many reasonable doubts. It's not just one, all of which lead you to one verdict in this case and one verdict only of not guilty. But let's go over it one last time together. A defendant in a criminal case is presumed to be innocent until the contrary is proved. And in case of a reasonable doubt whether his guilt is satisfactorily shown, he is entitled to a verdict of not guilty. This presumption places upon the people the burden of proving him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You've heard a lot about that. That's what people need to learn and be reminded of in this country.
Seriously.
Reasonable doubt is defined as follows. It is not a mere possible doubt, and we know that because everything relating to human affairs is open to some possible or imaginary doubt. It is that state of the case where after the entire comparison and consideration of all the evidence leaves the minds of the jurors in that conviction that they cannot say they feel an abiding conviction of the truth of the charge. That's reasonable doubt. It's not written just for OJ Simpson. It's for you. It's for you. It's for you. It's for all of us.
You get reasonable doubt. You get reasonable doubt. Everybody gets reasonable doubt. Unless you're in
That's the burden. You don't
America.
change it once the trial starts. That's the burden. Let's see how it works. In this whole idea of a burden of proof, let's start down at the bottom and look at the burden that's placed upon the state. And they should have a burden like this. You're talking about taking somebody's freedom for the rest of their life or whatever. There are a number of things that you might want to think, but in a case, sometimes in cases, we actually can prove the person charged not guilty. And in this case, in my 32 and a half years, this may be as close as any case where somebody's been proven not guilty, because if you look at these facts, you look at what we've shared with you over the course of the last 2 days.
This is like literally exactly the same chart that was used in the in the Crumley
bottom
case.
of the rung. You may say,
No, it's literally
may say,
exactly
I
the
have
same one.
some suspicions. I think it's highly unlikely, but I
Someone
I
was
have some
probably a
suspicions.
OJ fan.
Somebody else may say, well, it's less than likely, but I don't know. I mean, they didn't convince me beyond a reasonable doubt. And Somebody else might say, well, he's probably not guilty based upon this evidence. Somebody else will say, it's unlikely he's guilty. No way in the world is he ever going to go over and kill the mother of his children under these circumstances. That the timeline shatters their case. Somebody says, I don't trust the police. Furman was central. I don't trust Van Adder. It's the messengers and their message. It just doesn't fit. Something's wrong. There's a cancer here. Possibly not. Guilty? Maybe not. As Mr. Sheck said to you, maybe not's not good enough. You're talking about somebody's freedom for the rest of their lives. Well, then somebody else may say, well, perhaps, I don't know. I suspect that he might be. Maybe he's possibly guilty of something. Maybe he's probably guilty. Maybe guilt is likely. Maybe guilt may be highly likely. I don't think any of you are going to find this case because I think we've shown that we've proven he's not guilty. But all of those levels, from proven not guilty to the guilt highly likely, is our interpretation of what you have to do before you get all the way up to guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, so that you won't have that queasy feeling about this case, where you can believe to an abiding conviction of the truth of these charges. Can you have that? I think not on this evidence. Not on this evidence, not on this case. They have failed. We ask you a question. Did you have the courage? Did you have the intestinal fortitude to walk back into this courtroom? If they failed to prove Mr. Simpson guilty, did you have the courage to walk back in and say, we find him not guilty? And you said you could do that. That was part of your job. You said you could do that. I'm going to hold you to that because that's what makes the system great. Your courage, your willingness to stand up for what is right. And so, in this scenario, thinking about reasonable doubt even more, the prosecution had a puzzle. And it was interesting how they did this puzzle. Technology is wonderful.
We're going to do a quick 1 minute grift here at the 2 hour mark. We are going to go for another 30 minutes. I don't know if you can stick around or not. You gave me 2 hours. You got 30 more minutes in you? You're still muted, so I have no idea what you're saying.
Damn it. It's fine. I want to hear the end of this anyway.
All right, we can do that. So we're going to do this for another 30 minutes, but in that 30 minutes, just remember to hit that like and subscribe button as much as possible. We on our little on our lowest viewership stream of the week, we got 134 here now. That's a good solid number, and 115 likes. So keep those likes coming. Subscribe to not only me but Ozzy Overlord as well, who's going to be covering the Montgomery trial in just a little bit, few hours.
Yeah, that's got to be rough. So join me for it, people. We can be miserable together.
Yay. And let's see what else we got to do here. Smopo Vienna says, Legal Vices, have you ever had Ardbeg Corryvrecken? My dad ordered a bottle, and today I had a glass of it, 57% alcohol, not as good as the normal 10 years. Curb your tongue, knave. But still very good. Salty seaweedish. Ardbeg Corryvrecken is my favorite of the entire Ardbeg Cora lineup. It's great. It's the highest ABV. It's got way more the smoky peaty. It's got more peatiness to it than the others, and it's got that huge maritime salty seaweedy stuff going on. So yeah, that's my favorite of the core Ardbeg offerings. All right, now the whiskey advice is done. Let's get back into it. The seal has been broken. I shall return.
And you saw they kept under this puzzle, putting on pieces and that sort of thing. So we thought about that. I thought about this puzzle, thought about what it meant in this particular case. They got a call from a very, very wise lady who reminded me that if you've ever gone to the store and bought a puzzle, when you buy a puzzle, on the outside of the box of the puzzle, there's a picture. So you know what the puzzle looks like when it's finished. Well, in this case, the prosecution took a photograph or picture of OJ Simpson first. Then they took the pieces apart. If they really wanted to talk about reasonable doubt, you don't jump to conclusions at the beginning. You don't rush to judgment and then be concerned about an obsession to win. What you do is you take the pieces and put them together, and then you come to the conclusion they got it all backwards. It's like what they did with the Fourth Amendment. It's like asking us, where is this witness? What did you prove? Solve this crime for us. They got it all backwards. Don't you see? And so that little example, a jigsaw puzzle, was clever, but really it trivializes a man's fight for his freedom, who's always said that he was innocent from day one. So I wanted to just summarize our sense with a graphic, thanks to Mr. Bob Blazer, of this evidence and why there's reasonable doubt as to each of these items. Please note the monitor.
Hi.
All right, let's look at first. We know in the upper left-hand corner, there's missing blood. They can't explain it, and they went down in flames, going out with a home video where it was actually embarrassing this morning. You want a little levity during the tough times, your deliberations? Play the Thanoparades video. In fact, it's so bizarre that if you listen to it again, you'll hear Hank Goldberg is laughing himself. He starts laughing when you look at the words are mouthed by Parades. He goes like that, and Goldberg starts laughing at his next question. How embarrassing this is, but this blood is still missing.
That's
you
beautiful.
have that syringe there. So, Mr. Blazer and Mr. Harris, what does that mean, that missing blood? It means reasonable doubt. Then we have the socks, my personal favorites. And when I talked to you about the socks yesterday, I may not have told you that in addition to the socks not being in the video at 4:13 on June 13th, and how they placed them there later, and how they were collected at 4:35 or between 4:30 and 4:40, Willie Ford came in here and testified to you he didn't see the socks. Forgot to tell you that yesterday. He testified they weren't there either. So thank heaven there's one person who wasn't part of that cover-up, although they got to him and he was saying things, oh, well, the socks may have been covered. But he still works over there. So we'll forgive him for that, but he didn't know what we knew about Lang and Mazzola and the time they were collected in their log. Plus the timing on the whole thing got them. And those straps on the bed further. So what have we shown you about the socks? Reasonable doubt. That moves to the back gate. What about that back gate with the EDTA and more DNA than you could ever imagine, and it's picked up and collected 3 weeks afterwards when people have been all over the place, and you saw the photograph? Look at that photograph. That photograph doesn't show any blood, it shows some little tiny spot. It was totally inconsistent. They're trapped again by the video. This case will go down as the video case because we have shown you for your own eyes why they lose
Clip
this
art.
case, why there is reasonable doubt. So the back gate,
That would have been
reasonable
high
doubt.
tech at that time too.
And then we started out
Cutting edge.
with the timeline because we knew at the outset the timeline with the witnesses that they failed and refused to call established a reasonable doubt. It shatters the prosecution case. If you start there, you'll find these witnesses credible. OJ Simpson couldn't have committed these crimes. There's reasonable doubt. He's not guilty. The timeline. We went from there to the EAPB, and you'll remember that, and Mr. Sheck has talked about it. I won't be redundant. The double-banded B, that's somebody else. They can't explain it. They never tried to explain it, except to talk to you about something that's not in the literature. It didn't work. There's reasonable doubt about who that person was. And so with regard to, and I see I've lost track of my chart there, demeanor, before we get to EPB, under demeanor, OJ Simpson's demeanor, all those witnesses who didn't know each other, who you heard,
That's the most beautiful
they
clip art
talked to,
ever.
you saw them all, you think that
And we'll pause here just real quickly. Duncan Idaho, the $10 super chat, some shekels to show my appreciation. How much further to Doggo Cam? About $5, actually. About $10. We're about $10 away. Just saying.
he was asking for
saying.
those people? Do you remember that one of the most
Just
interesting things?
saying.
Mr.
Wow.
Darden said that
I'm rich,
when the Scott
biatch.
Kennedy video at the June 12th recital, where a man just happens to stop by and takes a video. Simpson doesn't even know he's being videoed. This guy doesn't know Simpson. He's just taking a video. Just came to us out of the blue. They had the audacity to tell you he was on camera. You didn't know anything about being on camera. Somebody's taking a video of you. How do you know that? But we had that video, and they have nothing else to say. You ever notice when they have nothing else to say? How they just say anything? That's an example of that. That's an example of O.J. Simpson's demeanor. And that was our answer to this so-called fuse. We had proof for you. You saw him on that date, and we took you through step by step through that date. We've already covered the EAPB, the Bundy blood drops that Mr. Sheck did such a great job on, and you know about those drops. You know the numbers as well as we do, and I won't go over those anymore. I think there's reasonable doubt based upon those. And, of course, you know the Bronco. How can you trust the Bronco? Chain of custody, how can you trust
Broncos
it?
lie.
There's nothing you can trust about that Bronco and how they handle it. And then the gloves. The gloves didn't fit. The gloves didn't fit. The gloves didn't fit. Reasonable doubt.
Please say it.
You almost said it.
And then the why. The motive is not
So close, yet so far.
an element of the crime of murder, but absence of motive would tend to establish innocence. That's why Mr. Darden went to such a long and exhaustive study. And I've shared with you the fact that there is no motive in this case, but I just want to briefly tell you this about their theory.
Janet Burris with a $10 saying,
Release the hose.
If you believe what the prosecutors want you to believe, you have to believe that
thank you so
OJ
much.
Simpson,
For the first time in ages, we've
the limo
unleashed the
driver
doggo
coming,
cam.
I guess around 10:30, 10:40,
Papas.
after he goes and gets a hamburger at McDonald's, after having been worried about change because he had $100 bills, that he's already been packing because
Dollar
clothes are being
bills,
brought down.
y'all.
He's taking his golf clubs because he is going to play golf, and that makes sense as a pre-planned trip. He's just off the road and going back on the road. That he is perhaps the most recognizable person in Brentwood, in that area where he's lived, we know, for 17 years. That he drives a white Bronco. That he decides to put on a knit cap, and you saw that exhibition yesterday of him or you or I in a knit cap. He decides he'll put that on. He changes out of his tennis shoes, his Reebok tennis shoes, and his sweat socks, and puts on some dress socks, and puts on some Bruno Magli shoes. And let me just stop right there for a minute, put a pin in that. The Bruno Magli shoes, you heard all about Bruno Magli shoes and Bruno Magli shoes, and we searched all around the world, and we went to Bloomingdale's, and what did we find? There is nobody who ever sold O.J. Simpson any Bruno Magli shoes. They searched, they tried, they never sold him any shoes. So they just been talking about Bruno Magli shoes. I mean, there must be every other house in Brentwood. If somebody wanted to afford some Bruno Magli shoes, I guess they could. Now that's their case. There is no evidence that O.J. Simpson had any Bruno Magli shoes ever. In fact, when Lang is looking for the clothes and O.J. Simpson says, this is what I wore, here are the tennis shoes, he took only tennis shoes that night. There is no evidence that O.J. Simpson ever owned any Bruno Magli shoes, and please remember that.
Oh.
So he puts these Bruno Magli shoes on, and he's trying to disguise himself, of course. He puts on a pair of gloves that don't fit. And he gets in his car, and he decides that what he'll do is he'll drive over to the alleyway behind Bundy where his wife lives, in this big Bronco. Now, while he's going to do that, he's been over there a number of times, and you know they've already told you about Pablo Fenves and these people who live back there. You remember when you went on that jury view? There are homes and windows and things that face down on that alley, on both sides. From, I guess, Gretna Green side and from the Bundy side. People are looking down in that alley. It's well lit. You saw the photograph yesterday of what Mark Storfer would have seen. He pulls into this alleyway.
We have to do it. I can't not do it. We have to pause it in the right place.
Drive over to the alleyway.
Right there. We have to do it. It's earphone time. Anyone wearing earbuds, take note. Donald Sutherland incoming. Donald Sutherland incoming. Alert, alert, warning. 3, 2, 1. We had to do it. We had to do it. And then we got hello, Bob, over there. Bob Newhart, right? All right.
Behind Bundy, where his wife lives, in this big Bronco. Now, while he's going to do that, he's been over there a number of times, and you know they've already told you about Pablo Fenves and these people who live back there. You remember when you went on that jury view? There are homes and windows and things that face down on that alley, on both sides. From, I guess, Gretna Green side and from the Bundy side. People are looking down in that alley. It's well lit. You saw the photograph yesterday of what Mark Storfer would have seen. He pulls into this alleyway in this Bronco, in this disguise, dressed the way they want to have him dressed. So he's come and kill his wife. Now, somehow, in trying to kill his wife or whatever, he doesn't kill her in the back there where the car is. He goes and lures her to the front gate. Doesn't make any sense, does it? He goes to the front gate to lure her to that front gate. And then he gets into a fight, somebody he doesn't even know. This fight goes on for 5 to 15 minutes. The fight is so fierce that a hat and a glove are torn off. That's how fierce this fight had to be. The keys, the beeper. You saw how tough it is for any kind of an altercation. For gloves to come off, for a hat to come off, there's kicking, there's all kind of fighting in this small area. But that's what they want you to believe. And so we find the keys and the beeper and the gloves, we find specifically the cap and the gloves neatly packaged under the item there. And then he leaves this one glove behind and then just walks slowly out to the alleyway. Now, the dog that we heard so much about, who he bought, who was his dog, doesn't go with him. He goes the other way, out the front to go down the other way. Cato, the dog, under what they would have you believe. And he's got these bloody clothes on and everything. Now he goes back out there where his car has been sitting 10, 15, 20 minutes, right out there in the alleyway. Anybody could look, anybody coming home, people are driving up and down the street. Gets back in his car, then presumably he races back home where the limousine driver
Fire
was
Nice,
there,
great to have you here.
doesn't hear
Take
him
care.
come up,
Have a great day at
doesn't
work.
see him, doesn't do any of those things. We know from the time they see OJ Simpson, within 5 minutes, he's coming downstairs, packed, luggage is already down there, looking neat as a pin, heading for the airport. Now, he was expecting this man after he came back from the hamburger. This is what their case is. This is what they want you to believe. And just for good measure, it's not enough. That's not enough. Under their scenario, once he gets home, after he's rushing, he's got enough time, he's got all these bloody clothes on, he runs down the side of his house, where he's lived for 17 years, and runs into the air conditioning. He says, oops, no marks, of course, on his body, but while he's back there, he drops a bloody glove to match the other glove found over at Bundy. And just for good measure, so they'll be sure and find it, he knocks on the wall. He doesn't run into the wall, he knocks on the wall. He says, he gives a signal. Then he decides he comes in the house, but nobody sees him do any of that. That's what they have you believe. That is the prosecution's case. We have been here 1 year, ladies and gentlemen, and 2 days to hear this is what they have told you. It just doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
There it is.
Something is wrong with the prosecution's case, and your common sense is never going to let you fall for it. So the other side, of course, we submitted in answering the questions that OJ Simpson was at home getting ready for his trip. He had no problem with his ex-wife. He had gone to this concert. She had gotten the tickets for him. There's no argument. Nobody's come in here, so they had an argument that day. There's no fight. They talked earlier, made arrangements for the tickets. He went to the concert. You saw him at the concert. You traced his steps that day and what he did. And then he went on to Chicago and came back immediately. And everything he did was consistent with innocence. This case is a tragedy for everybody. For certainly the victims and their families, for the Simpsons family,
Cloak and
victims
Glower, good to
because
see you.
they
Been a
lost
minute. Thank you so much for the super
ex-brother-in-law.
chat. Watching this stream is like pregame for Sunday. OJ obviously had the best defense
the
team in the NFL.
He's been in custody since June of 1994 for a crime that he didn't commit. Someone has taken these children's mother. I certainly hope that your decision doesn't take their father and that justice is finally achieved in this case. One final word about Alan Park. We talked a lot about Alan Park. He's somebody that Ms. Clark, of course, found credible. But even credible people don't get everything right. Remember the golf bag? He thought it was a blue golf bag, and we know it's black with an insignia on it. We know that there was a lot of questions asked about whether you saw a car parked at the curb, and I read you the portion that when I questioned him where he said he hadn't really been looking. He was not very clear with regard to that. But like all witnesses, you hold them up to the same standard and look at them. And so now, I promise you we're going to coming to the end. If after hearing all of this evidence, you have a reasonable doubt, it is clear that
Nice use of the water.
OJ Simpson is entitled to an acquittal.
What was that?
And whether it is
Nice use of the
OJ
water.
or no
So that he could
result
punctuate
would
his
have to be
statement.
the same.
I liked that.
His status doesn't count. It's the evidence that counts and what's been proven to you under these circumstances. But he is a good and decent man who you have seen and observed every day. We're in session since September 26, 1994. Now, as it comes time for me to conclude my remarks, I may never have an opportunity again to speak to you, certainly not in this setting, maybe when the case is over. As you've been told many, many times, there's a very heavy burden placed upon the people, and for good reason. Prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. As such, it is Ms. Clark's duty to answer for you, as best she can, any legitimate questions arising from the evidence, which we believe casts doubt upon Mr. Simpson's guilt. There may be 1,000 such questions.
This is the
in a
yellow
case like
solo
this,
cup case.
which can be put to her, but we intend no such exercise. I do think, after careful deliberation, that it might be fair to suggest 15 questions, just 15 questions, which literally hang in the air in this courtroom at this moment. And as the time approaches for you to decide this case, for us to hand the baton to you, I offer these questions now as a most important challenge to the prosecution. The prosecution which claims that it's met its burden in this case. If that burden has in fact been met, you will be given logical, sensible, credible, satisfying answers to each of these 15 questions. If the questions are overwhelming and unanswerable, they will be ignored, or you'll be told that the prosecution has no obligation to answer the questions. If you're given anything less than a complete, sensible, and satisfactory response,
the gauntlet is going to be
satisfying you
thrown
beyond a
down.
reasonable doubt to these 15 questions, you will quickly realize that the case really is transparent, and you'll think about the scenario that I just went through for you, and that the term smoke and mirrors that you heard about doesn't apply to the defense. We proved real hard things for you, things that you can see, things you could take back in that jury room. And accordingly, you'd have to find Mr. Simpson not guilty. When I've concluded, for Ms. Clark's convenience, should she decide to deal with these very troublesome questions, I'm gonna leave a written list of these questions here when I conclude.
He's just challenging her.
He's showing off. I love it.
Now she can't say we don't have any duty to answer those questions. Go screw yourself. That makes her look like a bitch. She can't answer them clearly, so it makes her look like a bitch. This is beautiful. This is beautiful showmanship here.
Over these 15 questions with you just briefly. 1. Why? They're on the monitor. Did the blood show up on the sock? Almost 2 months after a careful search for evidence. And why, as demonstrated by Dr. Lee and Professor McDonald, was the blood applied when there was no foot in it? Think that's a fair question? In this case, let's see if she can answer that question. Question number 2. Why was Mark Furman, a detective who'd been pushed off the case, the person who went by himself to the Bronco over the fence to interrogate Cato, to discover the glove in the thump, thump, thump area? Number 3, why was the glove still moist when Furman found it? If Mr. Simpson had dropped it 7 hours earlier, as Agent Bodziak told you, Sir McDonald has told you, blood dries very rapidly. 4, if Mark Furman would speak so openly about his intense genocidal racism to a relative stranger, such as Kathleen Bell, how many of his co-workers, the other detectives in this case, were also aware that he lied when he denied using the N-word, yet failed to come forward? Part of Barry Sheck's 4th C of continuing cover-up. 5, why did the prosecution not call a single police officer to rebut police photographer Rocar's testimony that Detective Furman was pointing at the glove before Furman went to Rockingham? That is around 4:30 in the morning. 6, if the glove had been dropped on the walkway at Rockingham 10 minutes after the murder, why is there no blood or fiber on that south walkway or on the leaves the glove was resting on? Why is there no blood
Not today,
on the
also.
150 feet of narrow walkway or on the stucco wall abutting it? And you've been back there. Number 7, for what purpose was Van Adder carrying Mr. Simpson's blood in his pocket for 3 hours and a distance of 25 miles instead of booking it down the hall at Parker Center? Number 8, why did Deputy District Attorney Hank Goldberg, in a desperate effort to cover up for the missing 1.5 milliliters of Mr. Simpson's blood, secretly go out to the home of police nurse Thana Paradas without notice to the defense and get him to contradict his previous sworn testimony at both the grand jury and the preliminary hearing? Paradas was never sworn. We were never given notice. 9, why, if according to Ms. Clark, he walked into his own house wearing the murder clothes and shoes, is there not any soil or so much as a smear or drop of blood associated with the victims on the floor, the white carpeting, the doorknobs, the light switches, and his bedding? 10, if Mr. Simpson had just killed Mr. Goldman in a bloody battle involving more than 24 knife wounds, where Mr. Goldman remained standing and struggling for several minutes, how come there is less than 7/10 of
right
one
there.
drop of blood consistent with Mr. Goldman found in the Bronco? Number 11, why, following a bitter struggle allegedly with Mr. Goldman, were there no bruises or marks on OJ Simpson's body? And you'll have those photographs back in the jury room. Number 12, why do blood stains with the most DNA not show up until weeks after the murders? Those on the socks, those on the back gate, those are 2 major areas. Number 13, why did Mark Furman lie to us?
Big letters,
Why
big
did
all caps.
Phil Van Adder lied to us? And finally, 15, given Professor McDonald's testimony that the gloves would not have shrunk, no matter how much blood was smeared on them, and given that they never shrank from June 21st, 1994 until now, despite having been repeatedly frozen and thawed, how come the gloves just don't fit? I'm going to leave those questions for Ms. Clark, and we'll see what she chooses to do with and about them.
That was beautiful.
That'll be her choice. But I think you have a right to demand answers. if you're going to do your job in this case, it seems to me you will need to have answers to those questions. Now, there are many, many, many more, but as with everything in this case, there comes a time when you can only do so much. We took 15 as representatives, but I can tell you we had more than 50 questions. But 15 will be enough. Don't you think? I think so.
I think it's enough.
In this case, when we started out a long time ago, we talked a lot about truth. And I always like, in a circular fashion, that you kind of end up where you started out. Truth is a wonderful commodity in the society. Some people can't stand the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
But you know what? That notwithstanding, we still have to deal with truth in the society. Carlyle said that no lie can live forever. We've seen a number of big lies in this case, in this so-called rush to judgment. We've seen lie after lie, so much so that at least two of the major witnesses, Van Adder and Lang, Van Adder and strike that and Furman, their testimony by you may be totally disregarded, further dismantling the people's case. You have that right, you know, in this search for truth. In times like these, we often turn to the Bible for some answers to try to figure out, when you've got situations like this and you want to get an answer and you want to try to understand. I happen to really like the book of Proverbs.
Thank you,
In
Elon.
Proverbs, it talks a lot about false witnesses. It says that a false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall not escape. That meant a lot to me in this case, because there was Mark Furman, acting like a choir boy, making you believe he was the best witness that walked in here, generally applauded for his wonderful performance. Turns out he was the biggest liar in this courtroom during this process. But the Bible had already told us the answer, that a false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall not escape. In that same book, it tells us that a faithful witness will not lie, but a false witness will utter lies. Finally, in Proverbs, it says that he that speaketh truth showeth the forthrightfulness, but a false witness shows deceit. So when we're talking about truth, we're talking about truth and lies and conspiracies and cover-ups. I always think about one of my favorite poems, which I think is so very appropriate for this case. You know, when things are at the darkest,
1, 2, he's coming for
there's
you.
always
3, 4,
light the
lock
next
your
day.
door.
In your
That one?
life, in all of our lives, you have the capacity to transform Mr. OJ Simpson's dark yesterdays into brighter tomorrows. You have that capacity. You have that power in your hand. And James Russell Lowell said it best about wrong and evil. He said that truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet that scaffold sways the future. And beyond the dim unknown standeth God within the shadows, keeping watch above his own. You walk with that every day. You carry that with you, and things will come to you, and you will be able to reveal people who come to you in uniforms and high positions who lie and are corrupt. That's what happened in this case. And so the truth is now out. It's now up to you. We're going to pass this baton to you soon. You will do the right thing. You've made a commitment for justice. You'll do the right thing. I will someday go on to other cases, no doubt.
Or
As
die.
will Mr. Clark and Mr. Dart. Judge Ito will try another case someday. I hope. But this is OJ Simpson's one day in court. By your decision,
Or his 1 year in court.
you control his very life in your hands. Treat it carefully, treat it fairly. Be fair. Don't be part of this continuing cover-up. Do the right thing, remembering that if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. And if these messengers have lied to you, you can't trust their message. But this has been a search for truth. That no matter how bad it looks, if truth is out there on a scaffold and wrong is in here on the throne, remember that the scaffold always sways the future. And beyond the dim unknown standeth the same God for all people, keeping watch above his own. He watches all of us, and he'll watch you in your decision. Thank you for your attention. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cochran.
That's it, folks. That is it for the defense's closing arguments. That's the defense's closing arguments right there. Next week will be Marcia Clark's rebuttal, and we'll see how that goes. That's it. We survived.
That was... No matter what she had prepared, he just blew apart her closing statements.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally feel like after he read out those 15 questions, I personally think he went a little bit too long. I think that he gave her too much time to prepare, but just beautiful. Just beautiful.
That was great theater. That was absolutely perfect. Well, we got to still have 118 people here. Hayden, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and the final grift of the day?
Fair enough. Aussie Overlord. I am a lawyer here in Australia, practicing in Melbourne. I practice in commercial property litigation, property transfers, all kinds of crap, and I'm trying my hand at YouTube. And pretty much I cover anything and everything legally related. Mostly hilarious news articles, occasionally some kinky stuff. We do that over on Locals. Tomorrow, well, or should I say in about 5 hours, I'm covering day 2 of the Adam Montgomery trial. So that's going to be rough, but we'll see exactly how we go. He is accused of, unfortunately, murdering his 5-year-old daughter by striking her with a closed hand because she wet herself in the car. Yeah, that's rough. But anyway, that's where I'm going to be. So I hope to see you all there.
Well, hi. I'm me. I'm Legal Vices, and you're here another day, and glad to have you here. And we're just going to have to see you on Friday evening, where, what are we going to do? We are going to do just a regular old chill stream where we catch up on the outstanding cases that are coming up in the near future. We'll give you the latest news, and we'll just have a good old chat about it. And there's some Yoda butt for you on the way out the door. What do you look? Oh, you can't get around my crutch. Oh, there you go. Sorry, Strong. You wanted to come and play, but you're afraid of the big black crutch. All right, there we go. We'll see you on Friday, everybody. Check out Aussie Overlord about 4 hours from now, 5 hours from now,
something like that. I might be a little bit late, depending on time, because I've still got to walk Scarlett to school and back. So that'll be interesting.
Well, I have a holiday tomorrow, Friday, and I have a holiday on Monday, so I'll be there watching with bells on. So everybody join me over for Aussie in a few hours. Right now, I think we're going to send you on over to Good Logic, Joe Neerman. Give him a super special shout out and a hi, and tell him Legal Vices sent you. Thank you all for being here. You guys rock. Mods, you are, of course, the best there is. Chat, you are also the best chat there is on the entire internet. Never, ever, ever forget that. You guys rock. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you so much for everything. We'll see you here tomorrow. And we'll give you the long outro here, because the outro, for those of you that don't know, our intro and outro, the length, that came from Lincoln Kane's channel. One of my early appearances on Lincoln Kane's channel, we talked, we chatted for a while. He sent it off to his music guy who sampled it and created the song. And then I threw it to my editor guy, and they put together the montage. So Lincoln Kane is primarily responsible for this. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. How are we doing? It is time. It's time for a new trial. I've been keeping this one a little bit close to the vest.
Defense made a motion for a mistrial. Prosecutor was up to some fuckery. Potentially damaging evidence, no basis for it. The judge specifically said, do not ask that question. Do not use that as evidence. She walked right down the path and asked the question. It may be over on Tuesday morning. Batman Bruce Wayne bitch snitch. Gerald Brooks, your constitution does not apply to me because I'm a sovereign citizen, a traveler on the land. I'm from the Moorish Empire or whatever, bitch snitch. Because they're so fucking absurd. If you want to be a sovereign citizen, just do yourself a favor first. Go to YouTube here and then just get every sovereign citizen that's ever been before. Find me one that won. God dang, you're right. Don't go down this. It's not the path. Don't have time for stupidity. Some clever dick on the internet didn't find the great loophole in all of the world's law. Bitch snitch. God dang, you're right. God dang, you're right. Traveler on the land. God dang, you're right. Moorish Empire. Traveler on the land. Bitch snitch. Moorish Empire. God dang, you're right. Traveler on the land. Bitch snitch.